We here at Second Wind are well into our second year as a content-producing powerhouse, and we're hoping to keep going into a third, and perhaps even dare we dream a fourth, by donating as little as We here at Second Wind are well into our second year as a content-producing powerhouse, and we're hoping to keep going into a third, and perhaps even dare we dream a fourth. By donating as little as $1 a month to our Patreon, you can be a part of helping us keep going. If you want to be part of ensuring the existence of one of the few professional gaming media outlets that isn't being ruined and or shut down by corporate bastards, go to patreon.com/secondwindgroup and please consider giving whatever you can spare. And if you don't want to do any of that either, I don't know, take up cycling, it's good core exercise.
Pretend you're hacking in a 90s movie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rewind, episode number 22 for Tuesday, May 27th, 2025. My name is Marty Sleva, and I'm joined by Darren, Mooney, Jamate, and producer Eric. And we have a humdinger for y'all today. As you can see, our title topic, we'll be chatting Andor Season 2. This is going to be a spoiler Andor chat. So if you haven't watched it, you can't talk about Andor without talking about spoilers. You kind of just can't.
Feel like also if you've watched a Star Wars movie from like at this stage 9 years ago, you are aware of most of the spoilers of Andor.
I'm gonna tell you, Andor lives to the end and doesn't live that far past it. that's the one spoiler I'll give you all right off the bat. So we'll be chatting
Empire
Andor.
Is working on a Death Star.
Tell me about this super.
When did that happen? I completely missed that.
We'll be chatting about that. Mission Impossible: Final Reckoning, news of the Elden Ring, the video game, being turned into the film by the A24 and Alex Garland. Sort of thoughts on that. And then anything else we've been watching, including Darren apparently being allergic to reality TV, which I'm excited to dig into. Which I agree. Huh. I do not watch reality TV. I only watch fake reality TV, I guess.
Meta reality TV. Like again, there's a broader conversation to be had about reality TV and what is happening to reality TV as it kind of cannibalizes itself in this, like, we have a reality TV president world in which we live.
Reality TV in a post-reality world.
Yeah.
I like that. So yeah, we'll get into that later on. But Jamate, I'm glad we have you here. Because you just did a big ol' Andor binge. Like
I did a
mainlined
marathon.
Andor. You did a marathon.
I did in like a couple sittings, season 1, 2, and Rogue One.
Yeah, I think it was like a late Sunday night, and you were like, "I finished Andor and have thoughts." And so I was like, "This will be
so many."
And you haven't shared any of those thoughts, which I'm excited about. But also, you play video games, and I know for a fact you've played Elden Ring. You've played Elden Ring. I know for a fact.
I've made multiple episodes of my show on Elden Ring. I'm a big Elden Ring fan. Yeah.
So the news came out late last week that an Elden Ring movie is in production at A24 with Alex Garland set to write and direct. Alex Garland of movies like Annihilation and Ex Machina, Civil War, most recently Warfare, the TV show Devs, and he has a history in video games. He wrote a couple Ninja Theory games. He wrote Enslaved, Journey to the West, and DMC, Devil May Cry, which is secretly the best Devil May Cry game, but cowards don't want to say that. Wow. So I guess right off the bat, from someone who knows the game intimately, before we jump over to Darren, Jamate, what do you think of the news of an Elden Ring movie?
I don't know. I think with a lot of FromSoft narratives, they are purposefully very vague and nebulous, and I enjoy that. I enjoy watching lots of theories and making my own. I think trying to make a standard 3-act structure narrative of the entire Elden Ring plot might be incredibly difficult, and it might turn into I guess kind of, I really like the D&D movie. I think the D&D movie is really, really good. I love that movie, and a lot of its tiny references are sprinkled in where they, as a viewer, you don't need to understand what they're referencing to kind of come along for the ride. And I feel that Elden Ring has the complete opposite of that. I feel like you would see like the fingers and be like, what? like you just see a giant severed hand with 3 fingers, and that speaks and has an interpreter, and you'd probably like your brain would melt. And to a certain point, I feel like an audience would be like, "Oh, this is weird," and that's cool. But the other side is, I think a lot of the general audience would be lost, and I think a lot of Elden Ring fans don't really want this. So, who's this for? It's kind of like when I was last on with Lord of the Rings. Who is this for?
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Darren, what do you? I'm sure you have some sort of a passing knowledge of Elden Ring being a thing that George R. R. Martin was a part of in the early stages.
Didn't I watch Jack play it at some point? Didn't
Oh, I think you did. You joined Jack and I. Yeah. You joined us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
I believe Jack is a big fan of it as well. And like I
Yeah,
was, to Jermaine's point, I was also very confused by everything that was happening on
Yeah.
screen.
but you
like,
are an Alex Garland fan. You've written quite a
Yes.
bit about Alex Garland. Yeah.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask, because based on the description Jermaine gave there, which is the idea of like trying to fit, a complex plot. And again, this is the whole video game adaptations things of like trying to get something that you play into a convenient 3-act structure that you can watch, and whether or not doing that inherently reduces the medium's complexity and what people enjoy about the medium, where in the best case scenario, you're just watching a really well performed playthrough as opposed to doing the playthrough yourself, which is the art of the
Yeah.
video game. But I do think, to the point Jermaine was making, which is the idea of it being surrealist, abstract, and not having a clear structure, I'm also like, have you seen an Alex Garland movie? It's like,
Yeah.
He might be the best. Like, maybe this movie shouldn't exist, but if it does, he might be the best choice. Like the way in Civil War that he just brings up the Antifa massacre or whatever is how shit in Elden Ring is brought up. Like the Night
Yeah.
of
You don't
Black
know whether
Knives
or
or
not,
whatever
like,
is like, okay,
what-
yeah.
Were
I watched
Antifa
that.
doing the massacre? Were they being massacred? Who knows? That's not
Yeah.
our place to say. Sorry.
I feel like it could work in certain settings. I feel like a good movie to draw a comparison to would probably be The Green Knight, in the sense of just being given a quest and being like, I'm gonna do this, and then this surrealist journey
Sure.
towards an objective. That could really work. Like the Tarnished waking up and being like, hey, see that big fuck off tree? Off your pop. And then they go and do it, right? And they encounter bosses and NPCs that are very vague and weird, and I don't know. It's always a tough one with video game movies, because even at the best of times, with games that have narratives that have a huge through line and something to say, they're difficult to condense into a 2.5 hour slot, because these games take place over 10s, 20, 50, hundreds of hours. And Elden Ring just doesn't have that narrative through line. So I think it's even harder. More power to him. As a video game consumer and a lover of film, I've studied both. I would love to see a fantastic surrealist like interpretation of the Elden Ring universe. Like that sounds awesome. Whether that's going to be successful or not, I'm dubious.
Well, I mean, this is A24. I mean, and it's worth noting that they do have the other big game adaptation they're working on is Death Stranding, which is Kojima, because of course it is. Even I, who do not know video games, know that Kojima and A24 are somehow a match made in heaven. Quite literally, he is scanning like Alex Garland into his computer as we speak.
Yeah.
But like the thing about A24 is that they manage to keep budgets under control. They are a mini major studio where like Garland can do Civil War for I think about $50 million, which is insane when you look at Civil War in terms of like scale and scope and what is actually on screen and how good it looks in IMAX. So I don't think it's that much of an issue if this is not a major audience friendly movie. And I know we're pointing to Civil War as like the Garland like movie in this kind of area, but I also, from what you're describing and from what I witnessed Jack play, it feels a lot more like Annihilation, we kind of the zone
Visually,
that it would be operating
absolutely.
in.
Yeah. The kind of surreal body horror, or even like the end of Men. Like there are plenty of bosses who kind of feel like they give birth to themselves in Elden Ring. So fuck it, he already did that in Men.
Yeah. And he just came off the back of Warfare, which is a movie that like rejects the idea of a narrative structure. I'm kind of interested in this. I do think I think the concerns that you raise are valid, but I also think that like it feels like it's in the right zone for those concerns to be less of a problem than they would be otherwise. Where this does
This is
not
the
need to
correct
be
person to take it
Yeah.
for sure. Like,
Yeah, this-
if it's going to succeed, this is where it will succeed.
Genuinely, I think the best choice would be to not make it, and the second best choice would be to have Alex Garland make it. So
make it for A24 at a $50 million
so
ceiling.
honestly,
Yeah.
second best choice. That's pretty good.
Given how reality is working at the moment, I'll take it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the caveat of I feel like a video game movie gets announced every week, and 75% of them don't exist.
Fall for it. Yeah.
But
So-
also, you got to keep in mind though that was before Mario was the second highest grossing movie of 2023, and a Minecraft movie is currently the highest grossing movie of 2025.
Yeah.
There is like a certain point at which you light the fuse, and all of a sudden the things start happening because studios imagine that's where the money is.
Sure.
And-
You have The Last of Us tentpoling, HBO Sunday
Yes.
nights, and Fallout
yeah.
as a huge show on Amazon, and Arcane and Cyberpunk. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even on the gaming side, Elden Ring being an unbelievable success for FromSoft. Like Dark Souls and Sekiro and Bloodborne did really well, but Elden Ring absolutely smashed it and broke into the mainstream of gaming culture.
Mhm.
And that's really cool. And I think is a interesting fit. I hope that the director is given free reign to be weird and like you were talking about, like completely subverting the structure and just being like, I'm gonna do something really odd. I would love that as a like a film buff, but well, I hope that they do that rather than being like, well, the game's really popular. This is probably going to get a bit more attention than something else. Let's try and make it more user friendly and fuck that. Give me something interesting.
I mean, my thought is, I do have faith in. I think I have faith in A24 and Alex Garland. If you look at all of his movies, he never feels like a man who's ever taken a note.
Oh yeah, agreed.
Like for better or for worse. So I'm hoping we get to see his version of the movie. And I feel relatively confident it won't be like a watered down thing. Hopefully.
Imagine the studio exec there on the last day of Men being like, I have some thoughts about this because this sequence, like,
One thing, why is he everyone?
That's
Did you
my
not have
one
enough money to
question.
cast other folks?
I've only
I
got
love
one
the-
question. Yeah.
I love the idea that he never explained that. Like, it's not in the script. It's not
Yeah.
like anything.
Don't worry about it.
But when he gets on set, it's all being played. Like,
Yeah.
so
Don't worry
good.
about it.
It reminds me of the stories that Michael Bay being pitched the phone booth, where he's like, obviously, Phone Booth is the movie where Colin Farrell spends the entire movie in a phone booth. And the guy who wrote the script is standing there as Bay is reading it, and Bay is going, very good. Puts it down and says, love it so much. Can't wait to make it. Just got one question for you. And the guy bracing the script goes, wow, I'd expected more notes. It's like, Michael Bay's like, how do we get him out of the phone booth?
Well, that's your
One
commitment at the end,
question.
but that's kind of the movie.
That's the premise, dude.
I like what you got, but what I'm saying is it's bad, and we should just do
What?
everything else.
Okay, yeah.
What
I'll do
if
it
what
I
if
can do
this
something
was
different.
something entirely different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What if
so
it was
yeah,
an ambulance?
and then the LA was capitalized because it's a movie
Yeah.
about LA? Because you know what? Sometimes a city could be a character as well. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
True.
Do you think LA ambulance is the Michael Bay's phone booth? It's like Michael Bay finally figured out how to get him out of the phone booth, which is to put it on wheels and shoot it with drones.
Yeah, a moving one. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's true.
But LA isn't the only city that could be a character, because sometimes the capital of Gorman, I'm going to be honest, I forgot the name of it. Porgo?
Palermo?
Palermo.
Or Palmo?
Palermo.
Because
Palmo. I was about to say Palermo, I think is just a city.
it's a ham. Yeah, it's a type of ham.
It's a type of app. Segueing into Andor, we want to have our discussion about Andor season 2. I think it's just Andor, as a whole. And like I said at the top, this will be a spoiler discussion. So I'll put timestamps in the description. So if you don't want to, if you haven't watched Andor, you want to do that soon, don't want to be spoiled, you can come back and then jump to the rest of our discussion later on in the episode. So for the rest of this section, this is an Andor spoiler zone. Andor season 2 has wrapped up. Darren, you wrote 4 amazing pieces for us, one for each of the kind of major arcs that occurred over the 4 weeks. Just for people who didn't get to read those, like, kind of what were your high level thoughts on Andor season 2?
I think it's a miracle. Like I don't know, that is the high level thought that I have about Andor, is that I think this is the TV show of the year, and I'm saying that thinking this has been an incredible year for television, where obviously we have had adolescence. I have in fact been pit pilled. Thank you, Marty, for that. We have The Rehearsal, which you like more than I do, but which I respect greatly, and I think Andor is just a stunning piece of work where it feels like it is delivering on the promise of what the streaming revolution was supposed to be, particularly for these high level franchises, which was, we're going to take a lot of money, we're going to spend it on these properties, we're going to give it to people who have things to say, and we're going to do stories that we could not tell in cinemas. We're going to deepen the world of this franchise, we're going to explore big ideas, we're going to find ways to make it contemporary and modern and expansive. And I think, by and large, the streaming revolution has not done that. It very quickly turned kind of inwards like a septic toenail, where it quickly became things that you recognize, lines that you've already heard before, and references to things that you already know. And Andor is just a stunning piece of work. It is big, it is expansive, it is epic. The first season takes place over the course of the year. The second season, obviously, is a compressed timeline that takes place over the course of 4 years. And it covers so much ground with an incredibly vast cast, incredibly ambitious like themes and structure. It uses the language of prestige television and applies it to a franchise framework that is not necessarily used to that, but finds a way to make it work. It is a show that is, to my mind, the perfect encapsulation of like what Star Wars is, to the point where I would argue that it is secular Star Wars. It is Star Wars in the way that George Lucas originally intended Star Wars, this idea that there is a force, if you will, that binds all of us together, gives us purpose, and guides us towards a greater whole, even if we don't understand what it is in the moment, even if we don't understand the hand that guides us, the place where we are meant to be, to do the things that we are meant to do, with the people we are meant to do them with. There is something in the human spirit that pushes us forward, which to me is the purest distillation of like what Star Wars is as a franchise. But it does that while also managing to be everything that Tony Gilroy has ever wanted to cram into a script that he's never had room to do. Be it like his theories about young Stalin and Vladimir Lenin, his thoughts on like the 1C conference at which the Holocaust was planned, to his fascination with the erosion of truth in a post-truth world. It's all of these ideas thrown into a vat, mixed in with Star Wars, finding a way to make Star Wars, to my mind, more resonant, more contemporary, and more compelling, and probably even as interesting as it was back in 1977 and 1981, where it was a film that emerged from the new Hollywood movement and spoke to the times in a way that was urgent, exciting, new, and novel. And I love this. I love this show so much.
Yeah, I'm echoing pretty much everything you've said. We've talked about it a little bit over the weeks, Darren, but this was, this has been my kind of television viewing experience of the year. And honestly, the two of them combined, because I did a rewatch right beforehand, is, I need a little bit of distance, but this is probably my favorite Star Wars thing ever now, which I never thought something would be able to sort of top my childhood feelings of the original trilogy, which were movies I watched at this point literally maybe 100 times,
but a prequel to the prequel to Star Wars as well, based around the second lead of that prequel to Star Wars. This on paper should be the most nonsense streaming era, like we've run out of ideas, who are we going to do a story about? Cassian Andor, I guess, but somehow it's not. It's incredible. Sorry,
it is also
that's what makes it though, right?
Yeah. And so I was curious, Jay, about your experience, because Darren and I watched and covered Andor week to week for season 1, and then sort of in this season 2 drop model where they dropped each of the kind of the 3 episode arcs once a week. So Darren had obviously screeners early, but I would watch 3 episodes and then spend an entire week thinking about them, and I think that was one of the powerful things to me. Jay, as someone who sort of mainlined this entire thing, this entire journey, what were your
over
thoughts?
like a 2-day period? I watched all of it. I lived and breathed this. I think I agree with everything you guys saying. I think this is some of the best Star Wars media out there. Maybe not for the people who just live for lightsabers and like force choking. I mean, each to their own. I'm not saying you are lesser for just enjoying that stuff, but I feel like this has so much to say. It can be applied to so many different aspects of history and culture. I think that's really, really cool. I will say, though, to play devil's advocate, if you watch season 1 and 2 back to back, I think you start to see some of the pacing, like some of the pacing issues. There were some, like when we got, I think season 1 is immaculately paced. I think it's constantly driving, even in other shows where you're like, oh, it's the prison arc, and we're going to prison now. Some of the best episodes, in my opinion, like absolutely amazing television. And then I got into season 2, and I think it opened really well with Andor in the Imperial base stealing the stealth
the ship.
Yeah, super, super cool. Really nice to get to see the inner workings of that. And then he crashes because of his inability to pilot it. And then he has that encounter with the squabbling rebels.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool that we get to see this side of the rebellion that is hungry, quite literally. And they don't trust each other, even when they're fighting for the same thing, and they have to literally fight each other. I thought that was really interesting, but then there was a part of me when we were bouncing back to Mon Mothma and some of the other characters where I was like, oh, Andor's off on his own. He's on a side quest currently. Like, he's doing a side quest thing. And that doesn't mean I feel like every character should be intertwined with their own thing. It's fine for... and I think that's what they do with... what was the planet called?
Gorman.
Yeah.
Space
Gorman?
Austria.
Space Austria. And like everyone gets intertwined there, and I think that's really cool. But there were some aspects where, and they were using this to tell specific narratives and say something, and that's the thing. If they were doing this and the encounters they were in were not saying something, I would be like, what is happening? Why are we doing this? But even on like a basic level, you can understand what they're trying to say about the people and the situations they're in. And that's what really made it. But there were situations where I was like, okay, well, where are we moving towards? And yeah, I know that we're moving towards Death Star, whoopsie poopsie, here's the Death Star plans. But like on a series level, I'm like, usually you can kind of tell where it's going. But maybe in a way that's what makes it beautiful, because it's these little microcosms of society rather than, oh no, Darth Vader is big bad and he's going to choke me,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is worth noting it was meant to be the original plan was a 5-year plan where it was going to be 1 year each kind of season. And I imagine if that had happened, those things would feel a lot more integrated. Where you'd see things like, I think even for myself, things like the establishment of Yavin happens incredibly quickly off camera. Yeah. And I accept that as like a necessity because like I don't want to spend 3 episodes on like the bureaucracy of Yavin. But like I do think that, if you had that space, those things would make more sense. I would also say that again, this feels like it's the end of something where we are never going to see a show like this again. And the large part of the press around this has been Tony Gilroy saying, I'm never going to get to make a show like this. Nobody is ever going to get to make a show like this again. Because like this is a point where the 2 Disney Marvel streaming shows for this year, like Wonder Man and Ironheart, were shot before the strikes. There's one more Star Wars live-action streaming show planned, and that is Ahsoka Season 2, and that's only because that's necessary to get to The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is coming to theaters next year. Like, it does feel, I agree with you, there is a certain kind of compression, and this is, not 10 pounds of shit, but 25 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, or 20 pounds of shit because you're condensing 4 years into that season. But I think accepting that, I almost like that because that second season feels so exhilaratingly and chaotically paced, where everything is happening so fast and there is this sense of incredible momentum. And to your point about like watching it back to back, I did the same thing. I watched the first season going into the second season, And the first season, I think it is an immaculate object, as you described it. Like, it is just perfect. But it is the course of a year, and you really get to spend time with all of the characters and all of the plot beats, and everything is, to that point, properly set up and properly seeded so that it pays off. Where you can have an entire episode about the aftermath of the Aldani raid, which is just like unpacking what it means that they just did this thing.
Yeah.
And while I absolutely would have loved like 3 more seasons of this, I think one of the interesting effects of compressing it down to a single season is that it creates this frantic sense of the train has started moving down the tracks. Gravity is pulling this increasingly quickly towards the events of like Rogue One and towards the events of Star Wars, to the point where like the final arc takes place, I believe, hours before the events of like the original Star Wars. And there is just this sense of these characters are trapped by forces that they don't have time to understand or process or react to properly. So when something like, as you say, the Jungle Rebels plot happens, it's like, this is really annoying for Andor because he should be like doing stuff.
He should be
but
doing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But instead he's stuck in the jungle. And by the way, again, as you say, that sequence would be frustrating, except for the fact that, as you say, it's to a specific point. It's expressing a particular idea that Tony Gilroy has about like the ways in which resistance movements inevitably spend more time fighting themselves than fighting the enemy. And it also works like as a perfect circle with the season finale, where Andor begins this season stuck on Yavin, listening to people bicker about like how best to deal with the members of their group who won't fall in line, instead of concentrating on the beast that is lurking in the darkness ready to feed on them.
Yeah.
And at the season finale, you have Andor like dealing with rebels in Yavin who are too busy bickering among themselves and refusing to like deal with people they don't like, instead of dealing with Palpatine, who is quite literally described as the beast that will come for us all. Like, it is intentional, but I see your point. I do see your point.
It's season 1 that does such a great job of setting up those characters. Like you said, we spent so much time with them that it allows for this frantic pace in season 2. And I think something that I've noticed is they're so good at their visual language, and I went back and tried this. You can effectively watch those episodes muted because their visual language and the acting is so good that you can immediately understand what's happening. And a lot of that is due to the visual language of just Star Wars in general. Like, it's very overt with what it's trying to say visually, and you can look at someone and immediately go, Imperial, right?
Yeah.
Or
you can look at the
like,
Death Star and be like, that doesn't look good.
oh, that looks bad. That might kill my house.
It's probably
but,
like a satellite. It's like a broadcasting TV or something. Yeah.
And it feels like a treat, right? Because I went back and watched some of that, and I even went through and I do this sometimes. I call it the skip test, where you can watch something and you can like skip through like the dialogue, and if you can still understand what is happening with the start and the beginning of like the end and the start of a conversation, I think that's really clever, because a lot of the times with streaming shows, and I dread to think about how these are written, because you're competing with an audience that has so many things trying to grab their attention, and usually they will. So people are going to miss lines of dialogue. People are going to miss small things that happen. So if you can still understand from the like both ends of the conversation, I think that's really, really smart. And I mean, you could say that's a bit of a detriment. You can skip dialogue and still understand what's happening, but it depends how you look at it, right? Yeah.
And I think some of that, like, I mean, there's like a million things that are miraculous on this series. One thing that definitely stood out to me, rewatching season 1 and then watching season 2, was how incredible the sound design is in terms of using music and using repetition to create a what feels like a boiling kettle. And we had that on Narkina 5 with sort of One Way Out. We had that in Ferrix, the funeral song leading up to the sort of the last moments of
Banging of the gong.
Yeah,
Which like the gong is like what plays through the second season. Like it's like every time you see that 1 year later, you hear the funeral gong, and it's like, yes, death is approaching. Sorry.
Yeah, and then the Gorman, anthem that they start singing, how this becomes like it turns from like an anthem of resistance to a funeral dirge when the violence starts. I thought that was like just incredible. It's one of those things that's kind of just like stunning, the amount of effort and thought it seems like was put into every single facet of this series.
It's unspoken as well. Just the beauty of it.
Yeah.
To Jermaine's point and to your point, like I think what's kind of, and this is going to sound like damning with faint praise, but it's not. And perhaps like a condemnation of, and again, not just Star Wars streaming shows, but so many franchise streaming shows in general. But like the care with which this show is designed, like the care with which it is put together, and to Jermaine's point, its use of visual language, where like Mothma is frequently shot as if she's trapped, where you're seeing her framed by doorways, or you're seeing her through like slits, so you immediately understand that even though she's
at her collar, like
like trying to breathe, like the use of like mirrors, where like throughout the second season, Imperial officers are like perfectly happy looking at themselves in the mirror, but like Andor and Luthen can't stare at themselves, which tells you that they feel some sense of guilt or shame that their enemy doesn't. Like, it is so carefully and so immaculately and so perfectly put together, like in a way that many of these shows aren't, and many of these shows kind of take for granted, where it is just like the level of craft on display here, the production design, the set design, you mentioned the cinematography, the soundtrack, where like this does once every 4 episodes. So, sorry, once every 3 episodes, once of every drop this second season, Andor did something that I did not know Star Wars could do, which is incredible, living in a world where so much of what Star Wars does is what Star Wars has always done, which is what so many modern franchises do, where that closing moment of the first block of episodes, where you have the EDM music playing at the wedding as Mothma is dancing, which is, first of all, not something I'd ever seen on Star Wars before, as she's kind of sweating cabaret style, trying to like escape the guilt. She's trying to dance out the guilt for murdering. Yeah. That's it, for murdering her best friend. But you also have that like cut against an ironic montage of like the survivors of Mina Rao in the TIE fighter staring off into space with dead eyes, where like they've lost their best friends. One of them has been sexually assaulted. Like, it is like harrowing, but you have this pulsating EDM dance music playing over it in a juxtaposition that Star Wars doesn't generally do. You have in like the third block of episodes that moment with the Gorman massacre, which is just stunning, but that moment of Cassian riding in the car, listening to the pleas on the radio, begging for help, but knowing that he has to leave and he can't look back, which is just, again, just something that I didn't know was in the language of Star Wars. It is like incredible that this is finding new things to do with a franchise that is, 48 years old at this point.
In a prequel, as you said, like it's
yeah, and how it never it is the characters it brings back aren't the characters you would expect. It doesn't lean on, we have a Darth Vader and we have an Emperor, and Princess Leia, she's here. But instead, we get Saw, who was he was in obviously the first season, but I think he gets maybe my favorite monologue of the second season when he's talking about the Rhino.
Statement of the show. Yeah, it's like
yeah, when he says that we're the thing that explodes when there's too much friction in the air. Like, what an incredible, like, holy shit. I was like, oh, man. Okay, like, everything Forrest Whitaker had done with it is like, it all led up to this moment, which I was like, this is beautiful. And like you said, it just kind of ties a bow on everything. But even the show's ability to take a character like Cyril, who should, by all accounts, be this, like, sniveling little yes man that you despise, and turn him into one of the most fascinating characters in all of Star Wars. Like, how did that happen? Like, every time he appeared on screen in season 2, I was like, hell yeah, Cyril's back.
Let more
Cyril. How did that happen?
Amp up. Can we amp up the Cyril?
Dinner with his mom, his girlfriend. This is gonna be awful.
But again, like, and obviously it's the juxtaposition which makes it so effective, where you have Dedra going from planning the Holocaust to sitcom dinner with mom. But like that whole like sitcom subplot is incredibly funny. Like, a Star Wars show that is about these things that are incredibly harrowing and incredibly dark and incredibly contemporary. Like, that 8th episode was jaw-dropping. I did not know that Star Wars could do something as viscerally as unsettling as the way that it presents the systemic massacre of an entire people and the manufacturing of apathy around the massacring of an entire people, not to suggest any parallels that may be happening right now. But, like, you have that, but you also have, as you said, a sitcom dinner from hell, which is maybe one of the funniest scenes I have seen on TV this year. And they both exist in the same show, purposefully in conversation without clashing with one another, which is incredible.
It's
the
beautiful.
hard cut of Cyril laying face down on his bed while his mom and his girlfriend are bickering in the other room was so funny. Like, genuinely funny.
The best bit is when he comes back out and they kind of Stepford Wives him, where he like walks out, he's like, I better show my face in this conversation. Yeah. And all of a sudden, his mother turns to him and smiles and says, Dedra was just telling me you got a promotion.
Yeah,
and it's the most unsettling thing I have seen.
I view Cyril as a boiling pot. And just like narratively in general, just everything that happens to him is designed to break him, and he doesn't. And every situation they put him in, you're like, oh no, he's going to snap. And he doesn't. And it's just this resolve. And it's that moment, if you just think of it boiling and boiling and boiling and boiling over both seasons. And then he spots Andor in the massacre. And I was cheering for him. I was like, yeah, fuck him up. Like, get him.
You deserve a win after everything you've
done. 4 more episodes of Cyril,
Yeah.
baby. Like, wouldn't it be great if episode 9 just opened with Cyril?
Yeah, but like, if you think about that boiling, it's a beautiful narrative moment where you're watching it boil and boil and boil, and then immediately it stops because he is killed. And his blind hatred and obsession is what distracts him from his final demise. And it's all taken away. And I think that was probably one of the most effective deaths for me, of just... It's weird, like, I thought maybe I'd resonate more with the resistance and, you know, seeing people, you know, being blind to what they're doing via that. But with Cyril, it was, I feel, more impactful for me because I'm not sympathizing with him. I'm not agreeing with what he's doing or his motives, but I feel sorry for him. Like, I feel so sorry for him.
And the fact that, like, his entire, he takes every problem in his life, with his girlfriend, with his mom, with the fact that he doesn't realize that he's been a part of the creation of a genocide, and he bottles it all, and then when he sees Andor, he's like, you were the instrument of my decision.
Yeah, this is all your fault.
And at the end of the fight, Andor's just like, who are you? It's Don Draper in the elevator with Ginsburg, of being like, I don't think about you at all, because Andor's like, I literally don't know who you are. You were a blip to me.
For me, it was Tuesday. But like, and to Jay's point about like Cyril, what's incredible is that Gorman massacre sequence, up until the point where Cyril dies, is from Cyril's perspective. Like, the audience is watching that happen in the square from Cyril's perspective. Like, we follow Cyril into the Imperial command. Cyril sees the droids and realizes what the droids mean. He, like, confronts Dedra and he goes outside, and the camera is incredibly close on him. You get, like, that incredible moment where, like, things that you have seen in Star Wars so many times over so many years and are, like, tropes and cliches, like the TIE buzzing overhead becomes one of the most unsettling things. The stormtroopers marching down the steps, these guys who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, although I do like in the first like run where they kill Brasso, they do take the time to show the stormtrooper actually aiming. This is one of the great shots.
He's like, guys, what if we aim?
Yeah. Like,
what if
the other two are just firing randomly. But like, you were in Cyril's perspective, which is it's a bold choice. Can you imagine sitting down and saying, we are going to witness a genocide? And you're like, that's a big ask for Star Wars, but okay. And then you're like, we're going to witness a genocide from the little toady Imperial guy. That's going to be our moral compass who's going to guide us through the first act of this, before obviously Andor takes over at that moment. It's an incredible choice, and it works so incredibly well, because to your point, it raises these issues of like complicity. It raises these issues of like, you know, our part in this, like our blindness to it. As you said, so much of this is about the idea of like, the things that are happening, but people choose to be blind to. Where Cyril
Yeah.
is organizing this, but like believes that he is helping find outside agitators. It's incredible. It is so incredible.
It would
the
be
way
so
that
much
it's
less
written.
powerful from Andor's perspective. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a couple things to mention. One of them is watching this, because it spends so much time with other characters. The show is called Andor, but I don't really view him like as the main character. It's like everyone gets their own arcs, their own time to shine. I think that's really beautiful. Oh god, I'm terrible with names because I watched it all so quickly. What's her? She breaks into the hospital.
Oh, Claire.
Claire. That episode is just
Does not feature Andor at all. Andor is not in that episode of
it's
Andor.
not, and I think it's one of my favorite episodes. I think it's a beautiful little, like, interesting heist. The motive to get in isn't riches; it's to kill your adopted dad.
Yeah,
Classic Star Wars. It's about like understanding that Star Wars is a story about turning off your dad's ventilator. Like it's the most Star Wars idea at its core. Yeah.
And usually when they do, flashback scenes of like characters, why characters care about each other. This is really interesting because usually in a lot of movies that are trying to, do exposition, they'll front load this stuff early. Two characters will meet narratively for the first time, and then they'll do flashback scenes. So hey, this is why you should care about and know why they're talking to each other, right? But they don't do any of that. They wait until he's on his deathbed and she's going to kill him. And that's when they're like, these people that you've seen talking and bickering and having a relationship for 2 seasons, this is actually how much they mean to each other. Mm-hmm. And it just really adds this like really beautiful, poignant point to his death and her sacrifice to do it. And she became my favorite character after that point. I was like, holy shit. So good.
And it's again a clever mirroring because like the first arc of the first season has those flashbacks to Cassian's youth where he's confronted by people again wearing the New Republic uniform, so they look very similar to Luthen. And like so it's again the season has this structure where what comes up at the start comes back around at the end. And again, to get back to that classic Star Wars-ness of it, like Cassian is looking for his sister. That is the conflict that starts the show. He goes to Narkina, sorry, not Narkina 5, but he goes to the corporate planet and Morgana or whatever it is, and he's looking for his sister. And he, like, you would assume that the arc of the show is going to be, well, he'll find his sister at the end, or his sister will turn out to be Dedra to make it ironic or whatever, right? And
a Sith Lord.
What is so perfect about like the show is that it. And again, this gets back to the secular Star Wars argument, the Gnostic text of the Star Wars universe, is that it understands that Star Wars is about the idea of, killing your father or dealing with your complicated relationship with your father and also reconciling with a sibling that you did not know you had. The arc of the show is that Cassian realizes that Claia, although not biologically related to him, is his sister. That, like, what he is doing now is helping and searching for his sister. What he is furthering is a way of taking his pain and channeling it into something that is productive and helpful to other people rather than himself. And actually, like, to the point, I'm sure we'll talk about like Rogue One and its relationship to this. The thing that I got out of Rogue One after jumping from Andor into Rogue One is that Jyn is another surrogate sister, where the Star Wars franchise, because the choices Lucas makes with regards to making Darth Vader Luke's father and making Leia's Luke's sister, becomes this very insular, very narrow, very family, like, feud-esque kind of story, which is fine, and I have no beef with it. But I think that what Andor does that is so clever is that it takes that theme and suggests that maybe you don't need to be blood-related to people in order to have that level of empathy and compassion and care. Yeah. Where, like, maybe the Sith Lord doesn't need to be your literal father for you to seek to redeem him. Maybe the girl that you save doesn't literally have to be your sister in order to justify you saving her. And it's such a clever understanding of like the Star Wars mythos and themes and ideas in a way that is, to me, personally, like just so much more satisfying than here's a guy who looks like Boba Fett, here's a guy who looks like Yoda, they're going to meet the real Boba Fett as well along the way. Like, it feels in conversation in a profound way with, like, what I love about Star Wars, which is fun.
And even stuff like what was his name? Andy Serkis's character, Kino Loy.
Kino Roy or Loy? Loy, you're right, Loy.
He was Logan Roy's. He was actually his number one son.
You're my number one boy.
But no, the fact
he refused to let his father deal with the corpse that was found in the river. That was the alternate version. That's why he was there. It didn't come up on the show.
I mean, the car crashed and he couldn't swim, so he died. He died at the bottom of that little lagoon. But no, he doesn't come back. Like in everything else, he would have an appearance in season 2, and it would be like, "Oh, someone helped me swim to shore, and now I'm on Yavin. Look at us! Look how far we've come." And he doesn't. And there's a level of restraint there, in which I just didn't think in modern IP still existed. We live in kind of like a restraint-free world, and there's a level of restraint in this, which is ironic again, given that it ends moments before Rogue One begins, which ends the moment A New Hope begins. Like, yeah.
But it doesn't give you a Jin cameo, which I thought was very clever. Again, one of the I'm sure we'll talk about it, but like Rogue One is a very different production than Andor is.
Oh yes.
And like one of the smarter choices of the show is not to give you like a Jin cameo or a Galen cameo, so that when you watch Rogue One, you at least have the conceptual distance of going, oh well, this is Jin's story. Like, so that's why this is so different from Andor. It's not the fact that it was shot by another director and hastily retooled in post-production. No. This is the story of Jin Erso, and that's why it feels different. That's why Cassian seems a little bit different, because we're seeing him through another lens. And it is such a clever choice. I do want to shout out, like, I think the use of Ben Mendelsohn this season, Ben Mendelsohn is your biggest cameo, but he also makes perfect sense, where he is deployed so incredibly well over the course of the show, where he appears once per arc, except for the like most important arc of the show, and he appears often where you least expect him to, where it's like, we're gonna have a conference where we organize a Holocaust, and that's gonna be my appearance this week. I'm gonna be at a fancy dinner party. I'm going to put my finger on the head of Dedra Miro in one of the boldest acting choices. But that sequence is incredible. To your point about visual language, the way that they shoot him so that the camera is on Miro, it's at like Denise Goff's level, so that when like Krennic is speaking, you can only see him from the nose down, which is like such an incredible choice, particularly when he is arguably the biggest star in the show, or the biggest star in that scene at least. It's like, we want Ben Mendelsohn on camera, but it's like the choice to instead treat him as like the biggest fish in the sea, which again, to the point of like Rogue One, I like that Rogue One goes, okay, now we've moved up from, we're no longer at Miro's level, we're at Krennic's level. So what Krennic was to Miro, Tarkin is to Krennic. And there is that there's always kind of this bigger fish. Like, I love that the Emperor never appears. It would be so easy to do like a cameo from the Emperor, but I love that the Emperor is always in another room, or we're always like, the people who we report to just came from a meeting with Palpatine. We swear that we were just in the same room as him. But it's I
just spoke to Palpatine personally. They always
now,
drop him.
he sent me right out of the room. I'm not still in the room, so to give you a sense of how important I am. But it is like.
Do you think Palpatine was watching Mon Mothma's speech at the end that she gives and yelling at his TV like Trump watches Fox News? And
you fucker! Texting into like the Senate News Network. Very unfair. Very not unlimited power, limited power.
Speaking on visual language again, I think your example of how they framed Krennic in that interrogation scene is a beautiful choice. Whenever you see this in any game or movie, anything that's being done is a choice. It's like, you're not watching, as everyone knows, you're not watching a real scene unfold. Every frame has been meticulously chosen. Like, they could have done that scene with a dolly following him around the room as he paces around her. But instead it's framed from her perspective. And the framing of being below gives this sense of, like you said, being above and her being lower. And that is then just, he pushes her down. And it's such a small action, but says so much. He could have choked her. He could have made her do something, right? But just that one simple action just says so much. And it is just, is times by 10 because of how it is shot visually. I think that's something so powerful about this show. We were speaking about, I think Gareth Edwards, who did Rogue One?
Yeah.
Yeah.
the director, he is immaculate at scale. I view Rogue One as cameo porn, which I'm not really there for, but scale porn. Like, has some of the best looking, like, it's that shot where they have the TIE fighters, then the Star Destroyer, and then the Death Star coming into like being lit up by the sun. You're just like getting whiplash by like the scale.
The Death Star casting a shadow over the surface of Jeddah. It's such a beautiful shot.
God.
Yeah.
It's
or
so
even
good.
the way it uses AT-ATs on the surface of the planet, like in a way that you made these feel way scarier than they were on Hoth.
There's a problem on the horizon. There's no horizon. It's
and that movie does it so well, and I think there's a lot of stuff that was studio mandated in that movie. I think a lot of the cameos were studio mandated, but I really feel their visual language through those shots. And I think in Andor, they use scale so effectively. Like, there's that scene when, God damn it, names. Old man in charge.
Partagaz. Oh, the rebels. The rebels.
Luthen?
Luthen, that's his name. I'm absolutely terrible at names.
Listen,
Luthen,
when I mainline something, I don't know anyone's names. Don't worry.
I'm just like,
yes, Skarsgård.
Yeah,
Swedish guy.
The scene where he's captured by the like tractor beam ship. Those shots are just immaculately scaled. But on visual language, scale can be used not just to give a sense of awe to the viewer, but also give a sense of scale for location. Like Coruscant is nearly always shot in two ways. In its establishing shots, it's either in a massive cityscape or extremely intimate. Like it's framed on someone's eyes or an object on a desk, and it then transitions through like a J cut. You hear someone talking, and then it goes to them. And these extremes in how scale is shot gives a sense of just you are seeing a small part of a much bigger picture. Like there is a lot happening here, and that is all conveyed subconsciously through its visual language. And it's stunning, right? A lot of just how this was shot was just blowing me away, and then the story was just an added treat.
and to Marty's point about like sound mixing, like the way in which the opening of like the 5th episode where it's Clea like cycling through the radio. So like every episode has a different theme song, and in the first season they all build together to give you a symphony, which is again the use of music to state the theme of the show. Stories coming together to create a symphony.
Yeah.
But in the 5th episode you have her like dialing through the radio, and you have like that is a recurring motif throughout, where you will hear snippets of conversation overlaid. The sequence where Cyril goes to the office like right before the massacre, and you cut across the rows of cameras, and instead of focusing on any one of the exposition dumps, they all happen simultaneously. So you hear a quarter sentence here, a quarter sentence there, and it's all things that you've already heard, whether in the briefing with Krennic with the Ministry of Enlightenment, or from Partagaz about like what we're going to see. And just this thing which is so effective at the sense of scale that you mentioned, of there just being so much noise and the difficulty in parsing signal and noise, where there is this recurring motif throughout the season of like Luthen saying, well, first of all, it's all going too fast, the point of like that accelerationism that's running through the season. Everything is happening so quickly, but like we have little snippets of information. Like and again, the Death Star is the most cliche Star Wars object, to the point where like they just build another bigger one a couple of movies later, and then they build a planet-sized one, and then all of a sudden every Star Destroyer is just one. But it's the most cliched and hackneyed like Star Wars trope imaginable. But the thing that Andor does so well is create the impression of like blind men describing an elephant, where it is impossible for all of the people involved to like parse what is happening, because there's just so much happening, so loud, and to the point repeatedly stressed to be misinformation, contradictory disinformation, pieces that don't fit, pieces that are just noise, pieces that are deliberately misled. There's like the moment, and again, Saw. I love Saw so much. And again, in any other show, you would have the argument that Saw is superfluous, that he is quote unquote filler. You could cut him from the narrative and you would lose none of the plot. But the whole point of Andor, the whole point of like art, is that art is more than just a plot delivery mechanism. You have that moment on the base where Willman is going and he's teaching like Saw's man how to siphon gas. And it's like there are 8 different ways of doing it, and you have to master all 8 combinations. The guy is like stressing and fretting, and the guy can't do it. And eventually the guy goes to Saw and he says, look, if you told me which configuration we were doing, I could focus on that and I'd have a better chance of doing it. And that builds to a moment where like Saw publicly executes the guy and says he was an Imperial spy. I told him the wrong place that we're going to, therefore the Empire won't be expecting us there. Now, that is like disinformation in the context of like what Saw is telling the audience and what Saw is telling the people around him. But you're watching that, and there's also like a lingering ambiguity about whether or not like the guy actually was a double agent, or if Saw just did the mental calculus of this guy is not up to the task and is going to get all of us killed. I need to find an excuse to bring Willman along with us. Because he goes like, he had a transmitter, and he just nods
just reaches
to like
down. He's like, there it is, transmitter. I was like, what?
Yeah. We found it earlier. We promise. It was definitely in his stuff. Like it is, but you can't trust like, and for the show to trust the audience, to be able not to trust the characters is an immense like leap of faith, but is, to your point, all in service of that broader theme of there's so much happening. How do we process it? Like, how do we figure out what any of this means? Which is an incredibly complicated idea to do in any context, but in the context of a franchise where everybody watching knows what a Death Star is. It's incredible.
Yeah, it also frames it in a way where it makes the jobs of everyone involved seem incredibly difficult because of the relationship management. Like, I don't mean to say this as a bashing of A New Hope, but a rebellion is not people get in a room and go, oh, by the way, they've got their big Death Star, but we know a way of destroying it. Ain't that cool? Go do it.
We got a farm boy here who thinks he can do it. Like it's like, no, you guys don't know him, but he seems like he's cool.
It's like small actions that people do when they're like, being a hotshot in Andor, like have rippling effects on the relationships of the entire show. And it's like Saw Gerrera, like when they're talking about them in Yavin, like they're like, he's a fucking liability. Like if we see him, we're gonna kill him because like he may be doing good in a certain way, but he's also he's a wild card. We can't have this, right? Because the rebellion is so meticulously planned.
He's literally addicted to huffing gas.
Yeah, he's a nutter. And it's just the relationship spanning the entire galaxy and them not knowing who to trust, people going off and doing rogue missions, causing more problems, and the amount of spies everywhere. It makes this entire galaxy and situation feel so much bigger and more complicated than the blue and red lightsaber men are gonna fight, right? It's politics, and it's so good. That
sense of scale and scope we were talking about earlier also goes into the scale and scope of just the concept of resistance as a whole. And it kind of, again, beautifully feeds back into hearing Nemec's manifesto from season 1, kind of played, seemingly just, it went viral, whatever the equivalent of that in the Star Wars universe is, and Partagas hearing that before he offs
himself. Wait for the club remix, like, name us. Like,
but I just love how there are so many different colors and flavors of resistance, from tiny things like those. There's the two workers on Coruscant who tell the guy, oh, well, we change the passcodes every week, so I guess you'll have to go downstairs to get it. And clearly they did that to buy Mon Mothma more time, to finish her speech. To what Mon Mothma is doing, where from her place of privilege, she's one of the few people in her tier of society willing to say something. But then when Andor is scooting her out and Andor just kills her driver, that's shocking to her, because that's not her flavor of resistance. The same thing earlier when Luthen at the wedding,
he said, well, I'll have to deal with that. And she goes, I think she says, I'm sure I don't know what you mean, which is a very deliberate phrasing. It's not, I don't know what you mean. It's, I'm sure I don't know what you mean. And he responds with, that must be nice. Which is just like the coldest response.
Like, oh, you don't have these ghosts, haunting your dreams the way I do. That seems nice.
It's crazy how so much came from Andor killing the informant at the beginning of Rogue One. Like, that moment of This guy isn't going to be able to escape like with me because of his arm. I have to kill him.
And he's going to talk, and he's got he will talk. He won't withstand what's going to happen.
And he doesn't even think about it. Just kills him. He has a slight grimace on his face, and he leaves. Right. That was a very poignant moment to show very quickly to the audience that this is a different side of the rebellion. This is a rebellion that will kill its own men to stop important information getting out. And Andor carries that through. Like, he gets to that point, like through the beginning of season 1. But for me, it was the scene of when I saw the driver coming towards Mon Mothma and Andor. I knew what was coming, and I was still like taken aback, just with how he just asked his name, and as soon as he gets confirmation, bang!
I got her.
And then he just moves on.
Yeah.
And it's Mon Mothma's reaction. It's so powerful, and we see that so much throughout especially season 2, of just killing for the cause on either side. Just like, we will kill anyone to further our goals, for good or bad, right? For the Holocaust or destroy the big egg.
And the fact that so the arc of this is, to your point about rebellion, and to Marty's point about this idea of Nemec's manifesto going viral. There is that moment where Legret says it just keeps spreading. It is fascinating that the show's argument is, and again, this is a very Star Wars idea, that the human urge for freedom is kind of the force in the show. It is this thing that we cannot explain. It is this thing that links all of us, even without a discussion of it or an explanation of it or a planning of it. There are, every moment there are battles that are pushing the lines forward inches by inches. And that the idea of, to Nemec's point, the Imperial need for control is so demanding or so unyielding because it is so unnatural, where I love that the arc of every major Imperial character on this show is reaching a point where they just, they break. Where, there comes a point where they just, something happens and they realize that the system that they have been serving and perpetuating is a lie, and it does not care about them at all. That the ideals that they have, which may be true and genuine, are not the underlying philosophy of Empire, because the underlying philosophy of Empire is a pragmatic empire must exist. Where I can't believe that this is a Star Wars show that has a character commit suicide in their office with a blaster pistol, listening to what is effectively the Communist Manifesto. That is insane to me. You mentioned the idea of Cyril, and that's Cyril's final moment, which is another blue screen of death. Miro's final moment, which is absolutely incredible, is that moment in the prison where she's holding it together, where she's so rigid, she's sitting so rigid, the lights go out and she just breaks. She just collapses into loud, messy sobs. It is such incredible storytelling, but also understanding of what the Empire is in a way that I don't know. You were arguing this is about what the rebellion is in a way that Star Wars doesn't normally get into, or a different kind of rebellion, or perhaps a more grounded historical understanding of the concept of rebellion.
Yeah.
I think the show's understanding of fascism and of Empire is similarly grounded in history and more deep, for lack of a better word, than obviously happens in the cool space movies.
100%.
Yeah. The one character we haven't brought up at all today, and we'll be moving on to other stuff we've been watching.
It's Perrin Mothma.
Is that her husband?
Yes, I was so happy in the closing montage that we got to see what happens to.
He was sleeping with his. That's the mother of the boy that his daughter married.
It's true Star Wars. It's true Star Wars. You want to fuck your sister-in-law? That's the way it works. It's Star Wars to its core. Classic George
poetry.
Lucas.
It rhymes, baby.
He got the girl and is gambling. He's good.
I was thought, honestly, that guy seems like he lives a pretty decent life.
I think Gilroy has said,
hung in the streets of Coruscant. Pretty decent life.
I think Gilroy has said that Perrin is one of his favorite characters in the show, because Perrin is no, but Perrin makes us feel uncomfortable as viewers, because we're all why isn't Perrin fighting the resistance? Why isn't he getting up and pulling the nails out of the cross and helping Jesus down? And it's most people do not do that. Most people live Perrin's life, which is, why is everything so sad and boring? And he has that moment where he
I view Perrin as people who go to watch Lilo and Stitch and just go, yeah, that's good.
More of this, please.
Shots fired at
Perrin,
Eric's mom and sister.
Perrin watches Alex Garland's Warfare and says, "Why is everything so boring and sad?"
Oh, where's the
happened at
gambling
the
in the
battle-
sister fucking?
at the battle of or the Antifa massacre.
But like, I love that the show does go to the point of like bringing him back for the montage at the end, which is like even the shitty husband is like worthy of like consideration and is a fully formed 3-dimensional character in the world of the show, where it would be so easy to make him the like terrible husband who is oblivious to what Mon Mothma is doing. I think Gilroy has said like they had a scene written that they had to cut, which was going to be Perrin and Mon's final confrontation, where Perrin would reveal that he had always known what Mon was doing, and that he had like he didn't care, like that he loved her or whatever, and like he wasn't going to report her. She didn't need to keep it a secret from him. And it is fascinating that the show does, like, for all that he is a terrible person consistently and thoroughly, the show does treat him as somebody who has interiority, at least to a certain extent, which is incredible.
I never got the notion that he was dumb. I got that he was apathetic, like understandably apathetic, because he, like, even the speech he gives at the wedding is like, you guys need to learn how to be selfish as a couple. That's the secret to your success. Don't worry about what's going on in the galaxy. Be selfish.
And he was a college radical. Much of this is so well observed. Is like he was in college, like the radical, like screaming fist in the air, like fight for the good cause stuff. And now he's just become like middle class hedonist.
Going back a few minutes to the actual character we didn't talk about, Bix.
Sorry.
Bix was the character I wanted to bring up. Because I found Bix's arc this season to be fascinating, because I was extremely worried that we'd be getting 12 episodes of PTSD nightmares and like, oh, I'm slowly developing like a substance abuse problem because of this shit and no one can trust me anymore. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like a shitty way to end this character. But the moment halfway through the series where through the season when Luthen visits her or he visits her and realizes how low she is, and then Andor tells Luthen, goes to his office, which Luthen's like, you don't do this, and he says, you need to fix this. I don't care what you do, you need to fix this. And his way of fixing it is giving her the mission to go fucking kill the guy who gave you the PTSD. Like, that was the most like, hell yeah, brother moment, I think, in all of Star Wars.
But also, like, she has so much like agency. Again, it feels very thoughtful and very considered, where so much of the show is about the question, to get back to this idea of like Star Wars and the Force, this idea of like, what choice do you exert over your own actions? At what point do you make a conscious decision about your life, or are you carried by an innate part of your personality? That conversation Luthen has with him on Coruscant, where it's like, you know, you don't believe in destiny, but you have always been there. Every single time I have needed you, you have been there. And you have this idea of like, Bix exerts a surprise, like an incredible, shouldn't say surprising, but this is television and this is modern pop culture we're talking about. For a woman who suffers the way that she does in a narrative like this, Bix is allowed to experience like an incredible amount of agency, where she, as you say, does get to avenge herself on Gorst. She gets to kill her attacker on Mina Rao, but she is also the person who makes the choice about the state of the relationship with her and Andor. The end of her relationship with Andor is not Andor's decision. It is her choice made for the both of them. And that is, I think, a very conscious and deliberate choice in a show where obviously it's a show about fascism. And if you're doing a show about fascism, you have to explore the way in which fascism seeks to rob women of their agency, but still allows that character to retain some control over her actions and decisions. I thought it was incredible.
Yeah.
In a lesser show.
Go ahead.
In a lesser show, like the killing of the indigenous alien tribe Scream torture man.
Hell yeah.
Worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in a lesser show, it would have been Andor going to kill them as
for revenge.
For like, you did my girl dirty, I'm gonna kill you. But like, even though it's given as effectively a mission to, this is how you can get over your trauma, go kill the trauma. He does it, and he infiltrates, she kills, and then she walks out, kills the final guard, and Andor's just stood outside waiting
Yeah, yeah.
Like they just
yeah.
walk off.
Yeah.
It's like it's her thing, it's her mission, right? And he doesn't interject and be like, "Let me be the savior. Let me be the reason you'll feel better." It's like I'm here, and that's what a relationship is, right? It's like I'm here if you need me, but I'm doing it, right?
I'm an enabler in the best possible sense. I mean, I do.
Yeah.
I do think that, like, and again, to get back to the show's storytelling, how much of the show communicates so effectively, like how that information gets down, where you have Partagaz at the ISB saying to a bunch of officers, including Lonnie, that Gorst is coming to Coruscant. And then you see Bix killing Gorst. You don't. Any other show would have a scene where Lonnie goes to Luthen and says, "Oh, by the way, Gorst is coming to Coruscant. You should probably be aware of that. They're going to standardize his torture practices." And Luthen would have a meeting with Andor where he says, "Well, I have a way that you can kill two birds with one stone for your trauma."
Yeah.
And the show just cuts all of that out and trusts you to get it. There's a moment in the 9th episode, the one where Mothma's escaping the Senate, where Legret is organizing like he's organizing basically the kind of the sting on Mothma. And you have Luthen saying, "By the way, one of Bael's aides is actually an Imperial agent." And there's a throwaway line about how actually Legret had to use one of Young's men for this. And that explains how Luthen knows that there's a person inside. But you don't get a scene of, again, Legret going to Lonnie saying, "I need to use one of your men." Lonnie going to Luthen to say, "By the way, they're using one of my men for an operation on the day that, like, you're going to give the speech." And Luthen going to Mon saying, "By the way, I have a friend who's working with a guy who's loaning an operative." It instead trusts you as an audience to intuit all of that without explicitly stating it, while still being very clear in how everybody knows what they know. It's remarkable trust in the audience, but also just remarkable trust in the show itself, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, and even like I really love the kind of the coda when we're showing where all the characters are now and seeing that Bix is on that farm planet from the first 3 episodes, and B's there, and their child is there, and that is the kind of the what to go back to what Luthen said in the first season. What was it? Burn my life to make a sunrise I'll never see. Like that is the sunrise Andor will never see. But it's kind of the sacrifices that all of these people made were for things like that, and I thought that was just a really beautiful way to kind of tie a ribbon on that story. And for the love of God, don't revisit these characters in anything.
I was going to say, are you waiting for the
reveal
reveal?
Your daughter grows up to be?
Are you waiting for the reveal that the child turns out to be Poe Dameron? Like that's. You have to know that, like, Dave Filoni was watching the show thinking, okay, we know Poe was, like, born on Yavin, but let's say he was conceived on Yavin. Bingo, it's sold.
I mean, and Oscar Isaac couldn't be their kid.
In that, yes, they are two very beautiful people, and he is a very beautiful man. Yeah,
I hated everything you just said. I hated it all. I hated it.
It's happening.
I hated it. Any final Andor thoughts before moving on? It was just really good. That's my final thought. Is I really enjoyed it, and I would like more of this, but I don't think we will ever get more of this.
Yeah, just a miracle.
I feel we'll get imitations. I feel like we'll get even within Star Wars. I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think they're gonna try and interject more of this stuff into other shows, but do it poorly. And if, like,
I'm curious, Darren, as someone who reads a lot of comics, what would a Marvel story be that ostensibly, given a million things going right, someone could make an Andor-esque show in the MCU?
Probably Hickman's Secret Warriors, which is about a bunch of kids who are hired by Nick Fury to deal with Hydra, and the moral complexity that goes from that, which in true Hickman style it opens with an issue in which Nick Fury visits Obama in the White House and complains, and then I love that that's a recurring motif of Hickman's Obama era comics. The runs either begin or end with a character showing up in the White House and saying, "Obama, I'm watching you.
We got our eye on you."
Yeah. But I think Secret Warriors is probably the one that jumps out. But being honest, you could probably invent from whole cloth. Yeah. You would probably need to scratch this thing. The marketing for Secret Invasion was very much built around this is Marvel's Andor.
We even have a Mendelsohn.
Watching that first episode, I was like, no, it's trying to be Marvel's 24. Don't know that it's succeeding at that.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. I think comic wise, like they could have done something really interesting with Civil War, but they didn't. Right in the movie,
Yeah.
like they could have done a lot about like the superhero registration and stuff like that, but they chose to tell a different story. And I think like potentially, if they had them, they would never do this. But like a full TV show Civil War like adaptation would be really interesting and could say a lot of interesting things. But they'd never do that because all the actors cost too much, so they just wouldn't do it.
I mean,
Especially
there
with
is like
Red-Hulk.
Bendis's Dark Avengers actually would probably work quite well in that, where you have like Norman Osborn made head of like US security, basically put in charge of managing superheroes, and that run lasting I think 16 issues, where he spends a lot of it on television, which is one of the great choices for an Avengers comic. And I'm saying that unironically, is that like a solid quarter of that run is Norman Osborn on late night television pitching himself to the American public. I'm trying Gotham Central would have been, and again, like it feels kind of churlish to go to like the Batman well, where like the Penguin is also a show that kind of stands out as like one of these IP plays that worked relatively well. But like Gotham Central, which is about the idea of what it is to be a police officer in a city where people have freeze guns, and once every 3 months a killer clown poisons the reservoir, could be in some ways like a version of that. But like I find myself skeptical that this will ever be done again, where, it seems like Lucasfilm are proud of it, where like it, and Gilroy has been very clear to state that like he thanks Kathleen Kennedy, and Kathleen Kennedy protected him making it. And again, a reminder that Kathleen Kennedy, for all the internet likes to complain about her and for all the questionable decisions that have been made about the creative people involved in various Star Wars projects, she does have good creative instincts in recognizing people who are talented and protecting them. She worked with Spielberg for decades. She brought on Johnson to do The Last Jedi, which I believe
singular example of something we can get that feels like this. And yeah, I think for a second, Eric's internet vonked out. Eric, are we good? Are we back? We live? We still live? I had PTSD. Okay.
Ooh, okay.
Is that bad?
Good luck.
Okay. Okay.
I won't mention Tom Cruise, I promise.
No. Oh no! But our next topic is Mission Impossible.
Oh, I've got one final point about Andor.
Okay. Give us one more, Andor.
Speaking to what Darren was saying, I kind of view Andor and then the attempts to try and capture it again, kind of the same. I mean, I'm going to find a way to bring it to Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, was lightning in a bottle. If you go and look at the production of that trilogy, how it was made, how it was written, how it was cast, everything was just lined up, right? None of it was like meticulously planned by the gods. Things just kind of happened. Like the casting of Aragorn, right? He was originally a different actor, and then they had to bring in names.
Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah, it was
Viggo
Townsend.
Mortensen.
Stuart Townsend, yeah.
Stuart Townsend, yeah. And like everything just lined up. And what's going to happen, I think, is Disney are going to go, people like that, we got critical acclaim, we got a bunch of people to come over to Disney Plus, do that again. And all of the creative people, just like Peter Jackson, are going to go, no, I want to go make Tintin, right? Like, Guillermo del Toro, you go make The Hobbit, right? And they're going to go, well, no, you're being too different. You're doing something like something completely different. No, we want what we had before. You're fired. Like here's someone else. And I think it's going to be this perpetual thing. Like I haven't seen the new stuff, but we've got like The Hunt for Gollum coming.
Yes.
Relatively
the 2-part
soon.
movie event, right? It's a 2-part movie event.
Oh my, is it? Oh God. Yeah. Well, we get to watch Gandalf and Aragorn torture Gollum. That's going to be great.
You're assuming that it's going to be loyal to the canon, Jay.
Also, that little freak
true.
had it coming.
I mean, it's true. He did try and bite me.
Killed Deagle. I saw what he did to Deagle.
But yeah, do you know, like, it's just going to be this, you've done well, let's pay other people to try and recapture this where they can't, not because they don't have the skill, but because things aren't lining up, and they go in with that intention of like, we need to recapture this, rather than I want to tell this story, I want to do this. So Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. We're not holding our breath, but what a time to be alive it would be if we could get something else even a fraction as good as this.
I'm so
Well,
glad we
dude,
got this
Excuse
at all.
me
Like
one
that.
second before the next topic. My normal internet is back. I'm going to switch back, but we will disconnect for like 5 seconds because I
Okay.
have to switch from
Okay, go
Wi-Fi
for
to
it.
LAN.
Okay.
And we are back.
All right, I'll restart this conversation because we're back. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I was watching Andor, and it was a bit of a fever dream because, like I said, I watched it over the course of 2 days, and I was just like, and on the scene when they're on like I'm gonna call it the farm planet.
Mina Rao?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that one.
From the first arc, yeah.
Yes.
And they're on the farm planet, and then the Imperials are doing their like checks of like, show me your papers or we'll deport you. On there, one of the Imperials that came in to interrogate was just a friend of mine that I met at a media event. But like, he has like a line of dialogue and then disappears. So he appears, says this line, disappears again, and I was like, I thought I was
like a jump
genuinely like
scare.
hallucinating. I was like, was that them? And I looked it up. It is. It's a friend of mine. Just making sure I remember his name. Alex Jordan. He's a voice actor, and
Awesome.
he's just in Andor. And I was like, what? It was very weird. It's a weird feeling.
Pure jump scare. Well, my close personal friend Tom Cruise starred in a new movie this weekend.
Friend of the
Little
podcast.
indie movie.
Friend of the Tom. I don't know if we can say Tom Cruise on this podcast anymore because last time we did it just broke the show 2 weeks ago. Before we get into some Mission Impossible thoughts, a couple super chats from the top of the show. Thank you so much,
Ooh,
Quintuple with a $20 dono. Just said I agree. Loving the Andor. Appreciate your Quintuple. John Blee, been in the Green Gang for a year. I have nothing to contribute, but I nod in agreement. Thank you, John Blee. Sussy Guru with a €5 dono. I've heard people say that Andor improves Rogue One on a rewatch. I think Andor makes Rogue One look like amateur hour. Where do you stand on that? I do think I think Rogue One definitely is very clear that it was something stitched together. And that Tony Gilroy's involvement kind of came in partway through. In a perfect world, if I could wave my wand, there would be a third season of Andor that was just Rogue One. But that's not how
You
that
flying a
happens.
banner saying remake Rogue One over sporting events.
That's
Signing an online
exactly-
petition. Yeah.
Release the Gilroy cut. But it's fine. I don't know. I think Rogue One is it. Listen, in the grand scheme of Disney era Star Wars, it's in the upper 50 percentile.
I quite like Rogue One for all of its flaws. I think Jay's correct to describe it as Cameo City. Like the point where it loses me. If it ended on that beach with like Cassian and Jyn, I would think much, much, much more fondly of it than I do when it turns into, by the way, isn't Darth Vader really cool? And not at all like that whiny child Anakin. That moment kind of just pushes me out of the movie. But like I have a soft spot for it, and I think I went back and I rewatched it after Andor, much like Jay did, and it's kind of fascinating where you can see almost how it would map to a season of Andor, where like there would be 3 episodes of like, okay, we figured out what this is happening, we need to go rescue Jyn, and then there would be 3 episodes on Jeddah, and there'd be 3 episodes going to get Galen, and that happening terribly, and that being like an emotional climax of the movie, and then there'd be 3 episodes on Scarif, and the structure maps really, really cleanly. That said, I love that you can tell immediately like which parts of the movie Gilroy was involved in because they have such a clear through line from the show to the movie, which are Krennic. He rewrote apparently every scene involving Krennic, including the Darth Vader cameo, where Gilroy, I think, said, I've written Darth Vader, not really fun, didn't want to do it again. And Saw, like, the thing that really blew me away was, like, while I think Cassian is kind of a different character in the movie than he is in the show, which happens when you have spent like 2 years with a person, like watching, like, is it Saul Goodman on Breaking Bad?
Sure.
It's kind of a different character. Saul is exactly the same character. Like, it is a very clear line to go from I'm gonna huff diesel to meet my new slug friend over here. He's really cool.
His name is Borgullet. He's great.
Yeah. For me, scale porn. You're always gonna get me. Like, if you show me a big old ship in space, I'm like, I'll slug through anything if you show me a big old ship.
Yeah, I think the movie's very
Yeah.
watchable. I will say, like,
Yeah,
it
for
moves
sure.
along at a nice, consistent pace, and I love
got
like
its
getting the
flaws, though, for
Scarif.
sure.
Like, that's just removed from context. That's just a really rad action set piece. Like all of Scarif.
Yeah.
So, cool stuff there. Andrew Franges, thank you so much for a $5 dono. I think Tom Cruise went to a lot of work just to kiss and cuddle Haley Atwell. We will discuss shortly about Tom Cruise's penchant for finding his new future girlfriend. Being like,
And like,
Haley Atwell
there's
will
a
be my new
there's a
girlfriend.
sequence in this movie where like the Mission Impossible movies generally very good to their female characters. To be clear, this is not like an observation about the larger franchise, but there is a clear moment in this film where like Cruise is dancing between the line of life and death, and it seems like the movie has focused very particularly on certain attributes of Haley Atwell, where the shot is like literally Tom Cruise's head and a certain part of Haley Atwell's very notable anatomy, which is like, I don't know that Mission Impossible has ever been this directly horny for a woman before. Like,
No, guys, seriously,
normally
I've had sex. The Tom Cruise story. Oh no, the podcast is gonna go down.
I find the most erotic part of the woman is the boobies. Is the subtext of that?
Tom Cruise. Kid Barchetto with the $2 dono. Thank you so much. Is Stitch just a plush version of David Dunn?
The character
David
actor?
Dunn. I know David Dunn as.
Oh, no, it's Kevin Dunn.
Bruce,
Sorry.
yeah, Bruce Willis's character in Unbreakable is named David Dunn. Is that the David Dunn we're talking about?
Oh yeah, because water makes him dense. That's exactly what it is. His weakness is water, like every human being.
And the aliens and signs.
And like, Shyamalan, you bastard.
I do love that. Like that Stitch. Stitch has the entire plot of Signs, where it's like the Galactic Council aren't worried about Stitch because he's landing on a planet that is mostly water, which it feels like we tried invading that last year. It didn't really work out. It'll probably work out the same way.
I also saw, fittingly, that the original Lilo and Stitch came out the same weekend as Minority Report and beat Minority Report at the box office. So once again, Tom Cruise has been bested by Lilo and Stitch.
Oh no!
Do you think he's got like a thing where he's like the fucking alien? I swear to God, he keeps coming back.
He doesn't mind because that's who they worship in Scientology, right? So
you say it and not me. But like, I think. Yeah, we're going to see another Mission Impossible movie, if only because Tom Cruise wants to win that Oscar. And what are the odds the villain turns out to be a little blue alien?
I'm just saying. If
I killed Superman, I killed Netflix, I can kill Stitch.
Somehow the entity has returned. Shermando with a $5 dono. Thank you so much. Darren, do you think that the child at the end was a studio note or Tony Gilroy honoring the original ask of having a happy ending for Andor?
I think Gilroy, and to Gilroy's credit, is quite candid and honest when he talks in interviews. Like, he doesn't, and I love that Eric's just immediately smack bang up with the spoilers, so they're good call. But I think Gilroy is quite candid in interviews, and you can generally take him at his word. It's not, he rarely seems like he is trying to say what the publicist in the corner of the room is desperately willing him to say. Like, it's hard to imagine a Disney publicist being like, when you mention Andor, make sure to mention young Stalin and Vladimir Lenin. American audiences love it when you do that talking about Star Wars. So when Gilroy says, it felt like we needed something happy at the end of the show. We needed one button to leave the audience not staring at the abyss and facing their mortality. And that felt to us like the right message to send. And as Marty pointed out, it feels thematically earned.
Yeah.
We're doing this to make a sunrise that we will never see, but somebody will.
Yeah. For that moment there, Marty, you reached over and I thought you were about to grab your Bixen baby amiibo.
Oh, because these are where my amiibo are. But no, I also opened my window because I closed it earlier because there's a man who lives behind me who mows his lawn, I believe, every day, which I think is insane.
That is insane.
I
It's a
swear
very
to God,
virile lawn. Yeah, it's
5 streams a week. He's just mowing his lawn. I'm like, what do we do? We don't have that big of lawns.
He's a viewer. He hates you.
That's what I say. Is this passive aggressive? It just feels like passive aggressive.
Doesn't like it. He's more of an Obi-Wan season 1 man. So just not happy when we're talking about Andor. Yes, we touched on Mission Impossible. Darren, you wrote about Mission Impossible for us. What did you think of Mission Impossible Mission: Impossible - The Final Reckoning?
The first hour is an unforgivable sin against nature and a crime against humanity, and frankly terrifying. And when I sat in the cinema watching it for the first time for that first hour, I was like, my God, they have fumbled this so badly. And then it is followed by, and this is a very strange thing to say, 2 really great hours where it becomes a much weirder, much stranger movie with like the set pieces that you expect from a Mission Impossible movie, where you're watching it wondering how did Tom Cruise survive doing this, but which also managed to be very pointedly different from other action set pieces in the franchise. So I liked it a lot. I liked it for a lot of the reasons that I like the regular Mission Impossible franchise, both as like a piece of popcorn cinema. I, like Tom Cruise, also enjoy consuming popped corn, but also as a stunt showcase, but also as like, per our earlier conversation, a window into the unique mind of America's last movie star, where the movie feels at times like the dying hallucination of the oxygen-deprived brain of like the last living movie star, where it is a movie about how Tom Cruise will save not just cinema, not just the world, but humanity as a concept, and how, without getting into spoilers, it's a recurring beat in the movie that everybody is like, man, this weapon of mass destruction is so dangerous. Nobody should have it. Nobody should have this weapon. And then, like clockwork, once every half hour, Simon Pegg or Haley Atwell or Ving Rhames or the President of the United States will say, actually, I can think of one person in this world who could be trusted with unlimited power. And the camera looks at Tom Cruise. And Tom Cruise goes, who could you possibly be talking about? But it kind of works because it is so honest and so transparent in what it is about this kind of study of like what it is to be a movie star in a changing world. And because the set pieces are frankly incredible.
Yeah.
Those last 2 hours are stunning pieces of like virtuoso filmmaking. There is a moment in this movie where Tom Cruise is in a submarine and he decompresses the film into IMAX, and I'm like, I am so on board with this movie. Jay, it's incredible. If you didn't see it in IMAX, it's incredible. He grabs the wheel to pressurize the room before he goes out into the ocean, and he turns it once, and the screen kind of widens halfway to IMAX, and then he turns it again, and the screen goes full IMAX. It is stunning.
Yeah.
It's one of the great moments in modern
I mean,
cinema.
I don't mean to get graphic, but that does something to me. Like, that's fucking awesome. That's fucking awesome. Like, okay, so I will say, I did not know we were talking about this movie. I would have gone to see it if we did. But guess what? Unprompted, I watched part 1 yesterday.
There you go.
I think you mean Dead Reckoning part only, which even though it still ends with a to be continued.
Yeah, they got rid of the part 2 because they're like, audiences are going to be too confused, so we'll just spend a solid 40 minutes just explaining everything that happened in the previous movies.
Can we cut in random shots from those other movies as well and add some lore and reveal a secret?
That's what a lot of the opening hour is. A lot of it is
That
montages
is
telling a story and showing clips of every Mission Impossible movie, every character you could think of who's not Jeremy Renner, because Jeremy Renner is not allowed in this movie. Never again. Every other character.
It is very obviously an attempt to like retrofit this into a Marvel franchise as well. Like it is very Rise of Skywalker, right down to having no, your name is Ray Phelps. Like it is such a strange movie in that sense, where it's like, I don't watch Mission Impossible for the lore. I don't need to know what the MacGuffin was in Mission Impossible 3, because the entire point of that MacGuffin was that it was just a way to motivate the action sequence. But the movie's like, no. Everything is connected. Everything is important. You are going to binge those movies on Paramount Plus after you watch this. We swear. It is such a bad choice. Sorry.
There's one.
That sucks.
There's 2 things. The 3 things I want to talk about that I love from this movie. No, 4 things. First off, stunts are amazing. Okay, so I think technically 5.
That's a given.
Technically 5 things. The submarine set piece and the biplane set piece at the end are, both of them are just like 2 of the most amazing things you'll ever see in a movie screen. The coffin he has to get into to talk to the entity is so fucking dumb, but so cool. And then when he rolls out of it, the entity he gets in a coffin to talk to the entity, which is like this like AI that's like a god.
But is also the devil, yeah.
It's also the devil.
Anti-god and the Lord of Lies.
Yeah. And it somehow shows him, which just looks like footage of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, of nukes blowing up every major city on Earth. And it shows it to him. And he's freaking out because he's like, this is going to happen. And then he gets out of the coffin and all of his buddies are there. And they're like, are you okay? And he's like, is this real? I'm like, did you think you were going to be in the coffin forever? Because it was only like 90 seconds. It wasn't that long.
I mean, to be fair, like like you have Paris, who is the Pomme Motif character, say it will change you, and then it doesn't change him at all. Like again, this is one of the things where I worry that when I say this, people will think I'm being literal and I am trying to solve the movie or whatever. But like, I honestly do think you can read the movie as Tom Cruise goes into a pitch meeting with Netflix and has an existential crisis about the end of like what movie stardom means. And so much of the movie that follows is like Cruise working through this idea of mortality, but also working through this idea of like being the person who has to carry the shoulders of the movie industry on his shoulders while doing so. Where like so much of this movie is like all the Mission Impossible movies are about Ethan Hunt defying death, right? This movie is about like death denying Ethan Hunt, where there are several points where like it is not even implicit that Hunt should be dead. It is like explicitly stated that Hunt probably is dead, but somehow is still alive. Where like he strips naked in the Bering Sea and floats underwater, suffocating in hypothermia. There's a moment where he's dangling from a biplane, and the guy in the biplane says, "Ha! I have the only parachute," and parachutes away, only for Hunt to like find another parachute suddenly, but then that parachute catches fire, and it's like somehow he still makes it out alive. Like there is watching this movie, there is a real vibe of like death does not want you to die, Tom Cruise, and you have this kind of like fascinating meditation running through it. Where you mentioned the submarine sequence, where that to me is unlike anything in any other Mission Impossible movie. The way that it's shot. Where you have like the reflections on the water, the way in which like the place is lit. You have this weird moment where Cruise gets a jump scare where a skeleton points at him, which again ties back to this theme of mortality, where it's like you should be dead already. But it feels a bit like Cruise working through his anxieties as a movie star, where like we joked about like Mission Impossible 9 is going to be Tom Cruise kills Stitch, but like it is very obvious that like Dead Reckoning was like messed with at the box office by Oppenheimer. And there is a real vibe to this movie, to Marty's point, of like, fine, I'll make my own Oppenheimer with sleigh dogs and biplanes, where it's like, I can make a movie about nuclear annihilation too. And there is a real sense in those sequences in the submarine, which are shot in the Nolan style of where you have the rotating corridor with the camera as a fixed point, but also using Kubrick as a reference, where the way that he shot in the spacesuit is designed, the way that he shot in the underwater suit is designed to look like the spacesuit in 2001, right down to the jets and the way in which he maneuvers underwater. Like, it really does feel like Cruise going, just so we're clear, I was the last actor to lead a Stanley Kubrick movie, and I am part of this pedigree of Hollywood, and you can take your Oppenheimer and shove it. I made a Kubrick movie. Yeah. It is so fascinating that like so much of this movie is informed by Cruise working through like what seem to be his anxieties, which are like no anxieties that any human being has ever experienced before in the history of mankind.
Yeah. They also do a great job. Him and Christopher McQuarrie do a great job of, I think it is, I don't want to be mean. I think it's dumb guys' versions of what they think smart guys talk like, or just dumb guy ideas of smart things. Of like, there's only one USB that could fit this god entity, and it's like a big crystal that glows that glows for some reason. And they're like, "This is a 1 billion terabyte USB." And it's just like slightly.
I didn't know somebody could design that, but oh no, Luther did it off screen because Luther like it's.
They also at one point a character says he's gonna kill cyberspace.
Yes, he's gonna kill the internet. Like again, this is Tom Cruise versus the internet. But like. And again, worth noting, you mentioned the Terminator 2 Judgment Day of this, which is not subtle. they do like the cities exploding and the shot of the missiles lifted directly from Terminator 2. But like it is also notable that this summer also gave us Thunderbolts, which introduces Bucky Barnes in the style of Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2, and Mithrigan 2.0 is also doing a classic Terminator 2 switch. I love that there is Big Jim is in the water, as it were. And I mean, you could arguably even say the submarine sequence is very obviously like The Abyss as well. It's very much like the torturing your actors by making them film on water. Like, it is fascinating how much of this is like just remember movies as a movie.
Remember movies. Also, my question to Darren, my last question about the movie. At a point, people have to decide an American city needs to be sacrificed. What city do you think they chose? Because they never say which one.
No, again, this is very Tom Cruise is asked what his favorite movie is, and he responds with,
If
"I love movies so much."
If Coppola was making this movie, they would have ADR'd in the name of the city you saw the movie in.
Yeah,
It would have been like, "Oh no, shit, Topeka, they're coming from us."
Again, like it is worth stressing how completely insane that entire plot is. Where like they do Doctor Strangelove or Failsafe. Like again, it's Buster Keaton, like all of the Mission Impossible movies, but it's Buster Keaton as shot by Christopher Nolan and Stanley Kubrick, where like there's a moment, like Jay, you have not seen the movie, but where like Cruise is taken to Mount Weather, which is obviously this like secret base where the US military is prepared for doomsday. And because the entity works in artificial intelligence, they've gone back to analog, which is classic. We're moving ships across giant boards in the style of a 1960s movie. And there's a big clock on the wall counting down to how long it is before we lose control of the nuclear arsenal and when doomsday is going to happen. And it is like, to like Marty's point about like whether it's a dumb person's idea of a smart person or a smart person's idea of a dumb person. But there is this kind of like, this is what if Dr. Strangelove got hit on the head with a brick, but also had like some of the best stunts you have ever seen in it. Yeah. And it is, I have never really seen a movie like this. The closest point of comparison is something like our Meathead poet laureate, Jared Butler, when he does like Den of Thieves as like Meathead Heat, or was it like Den of Thieves 2 Pantera as Meathead Miami Vice? But those don't have sequences where Jared Butler like dangles off a biplane in the middle of it, or like boards a submarine underwater. This is the thing, where for all the problems with that first act, and that first act is like tedious, it is like stare at the ceiling, like frustrating. The final 2 hours of this movie are like nothing I have ever seen, which is kind of incredible to say about the 8th movie in a franchise where Tom Cruise tries to kill himself for your amusement. And to answer your question, Marty, I think it was Pittsburgh.
I think I know what I'm gonna do. I've never been sold on a movie more than what you've just described. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy a ticket and then show up an hour late.
Just get
literally,
yeah.
Wait until the moment you hear like Tom Cruise say the words "Madam President" and then you're clear. Like it's literally the moment that Cruise talks to Angela Bassett, the movie immediately just like writes itself on rails. Like,
yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's good stuff. I didn't know about the IMAX thing because I don't have an IMAX in my city. Now I need to know.
It is incredible. Like it is just like, it is such a like a we know what we're doing moment, where the first time he does it, I'm like, wait, did that happen? And then they do it again just so you catch it. Like it is so great.
What? God, there's what movie? Some movie changed its aspect ratio like that. Like used a thematic moment to enlarge its aspect ratio into IMAX, and I can't remember. It's something I saw in the last 10 years. It doesn't mean anything. So
you're obviously thinking of like Transformers: The Last Night, where there are like 8 different aspect ratios in a 30-second conversation.
Yeah,
shot.
When Anthony Hopkins gets hit by a large robot, there's a new one. When TJ Miller gets turned into a skeleton, there's a new one.
I think Guardians of the Galaxy 3 does it, where like it as it like focuses in on characters, the borders come back in. But sorry, Jay.
I need to.
Okay.
There's a movie that uses aspect ratio to denote time that I watched recently. Like depending on what period you're watching, because it hops between different times.
Yeah, like 4x3 in the past or something.
It changes. It changes all of its aspect ratios, which was nice.
Yeah. Good movie. Do you want to talk about other stuff we've been watching? Jay, you been watching anything?
Well, Dead Reckoning Part Not 1, which I kind of enjoyed until the last kind of section of it. I really enjoyed that the Buster Keaton like car being cuffed
Through Rome.
That was great.
That was awesome. I was like, this is cinema. Like, this is great. But then, you know, I feel like sometimes they're trying to set up the things that I feel like they pay off in this last 2 hours of this next movie. But there's lots of, oh, isn't the entity so bad? We want them keys. And I'm like, yeah.
You could say you're inside the entity right now.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Cyberspace.
And then there's I'm trying to think of the other big set pieces, like, and the other one is like Tom Cruise driving off the mountain and then parachuting into a train.
Oh yeah, under the train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leaping
Yeah,
off
like
the Paramount logo, I think, is how Patrick Willems described it.
Yeah, and I don't know, I wasn't as blown away by that stunt as I am usually with, because a lot of the times the things he's doing feel extremely grounded. It reminded me of the whichever version this was, where he jumps out of the plane and skydives with Superman, Henry Cavill.
That's Fallout. That's
Fallout. Yeah, that's probably
Fallout,
I think a
like,
lot of people point to as kind of like the
best
maybe
of
the
it.
peak of the series. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's lots of cool stunts in that one, but the skydiving didn't really do anything for me because, well, one, in Fallout they like add a bunch of CG like clouds and lightning and shit, and it just feels fake. Whereas I think the whole point for me of like the stunts in any Mission Impossible is how grounded it feels because he's actually doing that thing. And with him like parachuting off of the cliff, jumping off the bike and then parachuting is really cool. But then the bookend to that is him smashing through the train
the
and then
carriage, yeah.
like Buster Keaton taking out the guard by accident.
And him just being
which
like,
feels
"Where
very-
am I?"
Where am
like
I?
clearly concussed. Yeah.
Awesome scene, but it didn't feel like the end of the stunt was a set. Right, it's him smashing through a window. It didn't feel like, you know, him hanging on the side of a plane.
I was about to say
Whichever
the two main
version
set
he
pieces
does
of
that.
this, I think you'll love the
Yeah.
plane set piece that closes the movie.
I have
There's
no
all the
idea how
market
they did
material.
that. Yeah.
I assume he's dead. I know he was on
They've
Fallon
just
a
been-
few weeks ago. He's dead. I think he's dead.
The entity is just like puppeting him at the moment. But like
He never got out of that coffin.
to Jay's point, like I think what is really cool about the franchise is that not only do obviously they all have different set pieces and different stunts or whatever, even the Macquarie movies have different tones. Where like Fallout is a much more serious and much more austere like action movie with like, well, we gotta save the world, you gotta choose to sacrifice somebody in order for the greater good, kind of like gritty moral drama in the style of something like The Dark Knight. Then you get to Dead Reckoning, which I think I said last week was trying to soft launch the idea of Tom Cruise fucks again, and then like this movie, it's the final reckoning is like, what if it's Christopher Nolan and Stanley Kubrick direct Buster Keaton? Like, I love that the movies, even from the same director and with the same star, and ostensibly with the same character, as much as Ethan Hunt is a character, they still feel different from one another in a way that isn't always the case in the modern landscape.
Yeah. It's like Mission Impossible is like the movie version of like Games Workshop whoring out the IP for Warhammer 40k. It's like, you do what you want. Like, hey, your creative interpretation, do whatever you want. And for Mission Impossible, like watching, even between the first and the second, they are completely different movies.
Yeah.
And it is like whiplash for people who haven't seen the series. Like, I did this recently. I sat someone down to watch the first three. And the second one started and they were like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And I was like, you're in for a ride.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
kind
it
of
also
like,
feels like even though they
yeah.
were only 5 years apart, that it feels like
Yes.
there's an entire era shift change that happened.
yeah.
Almost similar to like Terminator 1 and 2. Like, it just feels like, oh my god, what happened here? Like something
Culture just changed.
between these. Yeah. And obviously,
way-
De Palma and John Woo
That's
being
awesome.
very
Yeah.
different
But-
authors. So
But both again, like, and what, even though like you're doing that, they're all still clearly inspired by Hitchcock. Where like De Palma is like a Hitchcock fan, and like the plot of Mission Impossible 2 is the plot of Notorious, and
Yeah.
even like the climax of like Dead Reckoning is like a Hitchcock-esque train goes through a tunnel kind of movie to a certain extent as
Yeah.
well. But like they're all so different in terms of tone and style. And like that is kind of what I love about them, where I know like Marty said that we talk about Fallout as the pinnacle of the series, and I would agree. I think Fallout is the masterpiece film of the set. But I think Dead Reckoning and The Final Reckoning would be worse movies if they were just trying to do what Fallout did again.
I agree.
If they were trying to like match the tone and energy of that movie.
Yeah, I think there's an ambition to these two movies that even though it does not hit all the time, especially in the first hour of the second one, I'm glad they exist. And I'm also excited to see what Tom Cruise does next. I know his next movie's with Inarritu, which I'm curious to see. That feels like oil and water. But
the plot of that is that a movie star has to save the world, realizes that he's the only person who can save the world, and I'm like, that is just the plot of The Final Reckoning.
I was about to say, all right, I take it. I take my statement back. That is just Final Reckoning. Yeah,
it's just making the subtext of them.
You got Leo DiCaprio to go to that bear. Okay, yeah, I'll fuck with you. We'll see what's going on. Tom Cruise, a fascinating man. Darren, what else? What else have you been watching?
Couple of big ones just in terms of releases this week. Well, I say big ones, like bad ones. The Fountain of Youth, which is the Apple.
Yeah,
TV
I watched that last night.
I saw
dreadful.
that advertised last night.
Oh, it's really bad. It's really boring.
Oh.
It has that again. This is the thing where you worry you sound snobbish when you say it. Where like I think there have been great streaming movies. I love, to speak to one of our co-hosts, The Power of the Dog. But I also love like The Irishman, to speak to another of the co-hosts on this panel. But like I do think streaming movies can be great. But there is, when you get to a certain point, particularly a certain kind of streaming movie, and not to unfairly single out Apple, but Apple do this a lot, Netflix also do it a lot, where it feels like a lesser imitation of a movie you have already seen. And in most cases, it's just like a genre of movie or a kind of movie. Like we're trying to make an 80s Anne Boleyn-esque kind of family adventure, and it just feels like the most lifeless imitation of that. The big problem with like Fountain of Youth is that it is not just a lifeless imitation of a certain kind of movie. It is a lifeless imitation of a very specific example of a pinnacle of a genre, where it is just like, what if we did like The Last Crusade? But don't worry. Lawyers, settle down. We're going to be looking for a source of immortal life, but it's not going to be the Holy Grail. It's going to be the Fountain of Youth. There is going to be a family conflict at the center of this, but don't worry. It's not going to be between father and son. It's going to be between brother and sister. It's an entirely different thing. There's going to be a sequence where we're in a library and we blow a hole in the floor, but don't worry. That's not going to lead to a sewer sequence underwater. That sequence is actually going to take place at sea, so it's going to be an entirely different thing. There's going to be a rich dude who turns out to be dubious, but don't worry. It's not Julian Glover, because he's dead. So it's Donald Gleason. Entirely different guy. Don't worry about it at all. The climax takes place in the Middle East, but I know what you're thinking. It's not Jordan. It's Egypt. Like, it is so obviously we copied our homework poorly from like Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And it's that thing when you're copying homework where you get a thesaurus out and you change a couple of the words that you're copying from in the hopes that the teacher won't notice. But in doing so, you move the emotional axis and like the actual drama and character and stakes of the story in a way that makes it clear you don't actually understand what worked about the original movie. You're just trying to copy like down to the second and down to the minute, and you've got all the same archetypes, you've got all the same beats. Why isn't this working? Why won't it work? And it is so frustrating and lifeless, and like encapsulates so much of my issues with so many of these movies, from like Ghosted through to like the Mark Wahlberg movies that I have to watch every now and again, to like any number of these, to that like Jamie Foxx vampire movie, to everything that Joseph Gordon-Levitt has appeared in over the past 2 years. Like, it so crystallizes what the problem with those movies is, by just, instead of saying, we're going to make a kind of movie that people used to watch in cinemas, but for streaming, we have no idea how to do that, so just take some notes and kind of figure out the timings and the characters and just do the stuff that they did, and it'll probably work out. But by doing that to something that is so ineffably tied to the talents of the people involved with it and like the unique perspective of it, where you can't rip off a Spielberg daddy movie and assume that you can conjure the energy that Spielberg can bring to a missing father. It's just not something you can bottle. And it is already slipping from my memory. I remember a fight sequence where Donald Gleason messes people up and it's never really brought up again.
No.
I remember some bad CG where a person is kind of crucified by the Fountain of Youth. I remember Stanley Tucci was available for like a day and a half of filming at most. But the
On
rest of the
set
movie is just like,
Conclave, they're at the Vatican. They're like, hey, fucking just take your robe off. We'll shoot this really quick.
yeah, it is like slipping from my memory, and by this time tomorrow it will be gone.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
and it's like directed by Guy Ritchie. That's John Krasinski and
It's
Natalie
Guy
Portman
Ritchie?
are the brother and sister. Yeah,
Natalie Portman, Oscar winner Natalie Portman.
yeah.
Padme.
How could she let me down? Irish national treasure Donald Gleason. He's like
Love
our
him.
second
He's
best
great.
Gleason.
Love him.
Yeah.
I'm the spy. I think John Krasinski's a bad actor. I think he was fine as Jim in The Office, and I think he's fine in A Quiet Place because there's no talking.
So what you're saying is hard pivot to director, our generation Spielberg, because you know what turned Kaczynski onto this was like, we're gonna do fucking Spielberg, because it's like
was
look,
If his ET?
Yeah, but say If is ET. If is like a movie about a kid's imaginary friend with a 2-letter title. It is very obviously Kaczynski filing everything he can off ET and trying to cram it into I'm an auteur, baby. Like, it is... Anyway, so what you're saying is hard pivot to Krasinski as director, right?
I hate all this. I don't want any of this.
And then I also watched Fear Street Prom Queen, which is
how was
so bad. It is so fascinating how like every cycle of like slasher movies inevitably gets to that like mid-80s run where we have figured out that these movies will make money if we make them cheaply enough. So we're going to shoot them all in a single location with an incredibly convoluted plot and an incredibly generic killer, characters you don't like, no emotional stakes, and a series of set pieces that are largely disconnected, probably because we had to cut them together in post or in reshoots. And it is fascinating how like that happens with the aftermath of Scream, where within a couple of years of Scream, you're into like the, I Know What You Did Last Summer sequels, and everything is just kind of like all the energy and enthusiasm of reinventing the slasher is just gone because you remember what happened to the slasher in the 80s. And this is like the post, I guess, Happy Death Day kind of like meta modern slasher movie where we treat the slasher movie as a piece of nostalgia of itself. So we don't have to deconstruct the slasher because we're treating the slasher as something that is inherently a throwback to the 1980s. I'm thinking, for example, of Happy Death Day, which combines it with Groundhog Day. I'm thinking of like Totally Killer, which combines it with Back to the Future, but is also set in the 1980s. The Fear Street movies, which I actually quite liked, the original trilogy of Fear Street.
That's why I was a little bummed to hear because I thought those original 3 were like pretty decent.
Yeah. And those are like, again, they treat the slasher kind of as an aesthetic where it's like, we don't have to account for any of the, baggage the slasher movie has, like whether as a set of tropes that everybody knows backwards or the gender politics or sexual politics of these movies, because we're treating them as throwbacks. So we can just kind of shrug those off and say, that's what you like about slasher movies, which is, to be fair, a decent approach. It's the escalation of Scream being like, well, actually, we need to discuss those things before we do them. These movies are just like, no, we treat those things as a relic of the 1980s, and therefore they're part of what you like about the nostalgia of it. And like Prom Queen is just the laziest version of that, where it is the April Fool's... Now, April Fool's Day is a good movie. I'm trying to think of like bad ones, but the problem with bad slashers is you forget them and you can't remember them to reference them. That's it exactly. And like, what is so weird is, to get back to the streamingness of, this is a streaming version of like those bad 80s slasher movies. So while it is filmed and edited like those, where it takes place largely within a single confined location that they presumably rented for cheap, it has 2 notable stars in like Catherine Waterston and Lee Taylor, both of whom seem to only be available for 2 days to shoot the film. And it also is structured in such a way that it can be hacked to death in post-production because it takes place in a single confined location over prom night. All the characters have to wander off in order to get killed. So you could it's incredibly episodic. You could just hack the movie together in post. If it's not working, you just delete a kill, or you move it earlier, or you move it later, etc. But despite all that, it is Despite all that, it is like the streaming version of this movie, which means it has an inexplicably large music budget, where like the kids are dancing in a warehouse because it was shot in a warehouse for cheap. But they are dancing to like the kind of music that means I can't buy Miami Vice on DVD anymore because the licensing is so absurdly overpriced. Where they are doing like Aha, they're doing Kate Bush, they're doing like all of these big expensive songs that just jars so strikingly with what is obviously a cheap and quick movie. It is such an interesting illustration of how like the more things change, the more they stay the same with regards to this genre.
Yeah. I love it. It's a bummer. I guess I'll just skip that one. You watch anything else?
I think that's what I can.
I'm sure you've watched a million things, but
I think that's what I could. Oh, I rewatched The Mist. Because I was feeling too good about.
Movie's
I
great.
was like, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling happy. I need to adjust that. I need to tweak that a little bit. And The Mist is like, if you haven't seen it, is one of the most depressing movies ever made, and I would recommend watching it in black and white. The Frank
I've never done the
Darabont
black and white version.
It's like one of the best director's cuts ever made, and all it does is just remove the color from the frame.
Yeah.
But it works for a couple of reasons. It works because the CGI looks much better in black and white. It always does. It looks like a proper 1950s creature feature. It looks like a 1950s Twilight Zone episode, which is what Darabont is trying to do. And also, given the bleakness of the movie's tone and resolution, the monochrome black and white feels like it is an appropriate kind of like way to approach the film as a whole. I would wholeheartedly recommend it. Oh, also I saw Lilo and Stitch, because I hate myself. Because I am the problem, Jay.
Never seen the original
actively
Lilo and
refuse.
Stitch.
I love
Have
Lilo
you
and
never
Stitch.
you've never seen it? You've never seen the
No,
original?
I think I was just. It wasn't that I was too old for it. I guess just at that time I was like, I'm too cool for Disney movies. I'm watching this stuff, and then
That was the
I just
entire
never went
pitch of
back.
it.
Yeah, but I
He
was like,
crashed the chandelier in Beauty and the Beast.
no. This was during my first small anime run. I was like, I will only watch Gundam Wing, and now
I
25
will,
years later,
Ghost
I'm
in
not
the
watching
Shell.
this because I'll only watch Gundam Zeta. So, it's like poetry; it rhymes.
Yeah.
I
yes,
guess I'm fucking Dr. Manhattan sitting on the moon. The year is 2000. I'm not watching Lilo and Stitch because I'm watching Gundam.
It's 2025. Tom
refuse.
Cruise has lost to Lilo.
Once again.
I will not ever touch a live action Disney thing ever. I won't touch it. I don't think they should exist because we already have them and they're already good. So
Darren, do you think any
don't
are
wanna see
good? Like without an
Pete's
asterisk?
Dragon.
Pete's Dragon, yeah.
Like, Pete's Dragon is the
I
winner.
love the original Pete's Dragon. It's like a nostalgic. Like I used to watch it with my grandfather when I was a child. I love the original Pete's Dragon. I can sing all the songs. It's very special to me. I rewatched the original Pete's Dragon last week, and on the like, oh, you could also watch was this the remake, and I was intrigued, but I felt like because of my affinity for the original, I might be mad. Like I'm like, why aren't they singing like the opening song where they're like, "Oh, PE, please come back to the farm so we can abuse you," you know, like. And it looked very different. So
I think that's the strength of it, though, is that like it's the one of these adaptations that is radically different from what came before, and like even that is the one that I would recommend without an asterisk. The ones that I would recommend with asterisks are the ones that are radically different. Where like Tim Burton's Dumbo is not a great movie, but it is a fascinating glimpse into like Tim Burton realizing that he has become like a member of the house staff at the House of the Mouse. Like it is actually about something, and it is about the director working through like how strange it is to be the person who makes Dumbo the live action movie. And the other one would be like the first Maleficent, which is flawed for all its problems, but is far, far, far more interesting than most of the shot for shot like uncanny valley recreations we've seen. Like there is something deeply, deeply deeply depressing about the idea that like Gus Van Sant's, I think it's 1998 Psycho, which was the shot-for-shot remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, like has somehow become one of the most important movies of the 21st century, where it is impossible to understand what is happening with Lilo and Stitch or Beauty and the Beast or The Lion King or Aladdin or Snow White or whatever without like looking at like Gus Van Sant going, what if when I'm tasked with remaking this movie, which somebody's gonna remake, what if I just, thank you for that, I love that. You got me in stitches, Eric. But
Hey.
I'm here all week. Don't forget to tip your waiter. But I do love that, like, at the time, everybody saw what Van Sant was doing. And even if Van Sant argued that he was doing it, like, as a postmodern commentary on, like, the horrors of capitalist post-consumption, or whatever justification Van Sant offered for doing it, critics at least saw that as being something grotesque and monstrous and unsettling, and something that you should not do. And it is so insane that we live in a world where, as we were talking about before we came on mic, the failure of Snow White led to like premature announcements that Disney was killing its live action remakes, particularly like the Tangled movie was just kind of dead in the water or whatever. I said at the time, and I was proven correct, and I'll say it again with regards to the How to Train Your Dragon live action remake that is coming next week. Those movies are going to be hugely financially successful because they tap into the nostalgia of people who actually go to the cinema, and people who actually go to the cinema and might bring their kids to see those movies. They're going to be big successes, and that is just going to lead to more of these movies being made. Like, it is depressing. It is sadly inevitable, and it's just like Universal have already announced they've dated Dean DeBlois directing a live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon 2 for 2027, and they don't even know how the first one is going to perform, because it's going to make all the money because it's the right age to hit with the audience.
Yeah. I want a guess now. I want a declaration. How long until they make one of the hardest movies to get made? How long till we see a live action remake of Treasure Planet?
That's how you know if their hubris grows too big. We get what was the Atlantis movie or Treasure Planet?
Yeah,
we get one of those two. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, that's the thing is, like, the Snow White failed. Like, whatever angry people on the internet say about, like, why Snow White failed. The reason why it failed is because there's no generational nostalgia for Snow White, because it was made in 1937, which was before, like, anybody still going to the pictures was born.
Yeah.
And so, whereas, like, if you look at the movies that do perform and that break the billion, which are, like, Beauty and the Beast, or Aladdin, or Lion King, which, to be clear, are all, like, about a decade ago now, those were the biggest hits of the 1990s. The reason why Stitch hit and Snow White didn't has nothing to do with the actual content of the movie, as depressing as that is to say, but I think is borne out by looking at the movie itself, but is instead to do with the fact that, like, people remember going to the cinema or remember the VHS copy of Lilo and Stitch, but don't remember Snow White. So it is going to be a wave of those movies from the 2000s. Honestly, like, part of me is like, when do we start seeing Pixar movies? That's the one that I wonder about. When do we start seeing live action reimaginings of Pixar movies?
Ooh.
That feels so fundamentally against everything that they stood for at one time.
Live action Toy Story, where it's only like Andy in the start and the end of the movie,
and Sid,
live action. Yeah,
and ostensibly a real
yeah,
bedroom, I guess. Yeah,
like The Incredibles, like, you know that somebody at Disney is like, live action Incredibles ? Like, if Fantastic Four underperforms, who knows what's going to happen with Fantastic Four? But I guarantee you that on the Monday morning, somebody at Disney will be like, live action Incredibles ?
Yeah, Pedro Pascal as Mr. Incredible.
I got it. 25 years from now, he will be 85 years old. Live action Up with Tom Cruise as the old man. Being like, fucking strap those balloons to my house. I'm going up there.
I mean, like, if you want to be really, really, really depressed about this, like, Dean DeBlois, who is the guy who directed Lilo and Stitch. He co-directed with Chris Saunders Lilo and Stitch, and he co-directed How to Train Your Dragon with Chris Saunders, and he directed How to Train Your Dragon 2 and 3 by himself, right? In 2020, during the pandemic, he gave a speech where he described like live action remakes as the laziest possible path that these studios could pick. He is directing the How to Train Your Dragon live action remake, and he is directing the How to Train Your Dragon sequel live action remake. Like, that is just how inevitable these things are.
I'll tell you, a bunch
They
of zeros
strapped
at
him
end
in
of
the coffin. They stuck some goggles on his eyes. They said, "This will change you," and then he stumbled out and said, "Is this real? Is this real?
Is this
And then the
is
movie
any of this real?
Yeah, and then the movie
Yes, it is
continued.
real. That's the marketing.
Yeah. I love that. I hate all of this, but I love that. Couple. Go ahead.
Just one more thing. It's also worth noting, and because we should talk about this, it's all just larger franchise stuff as well. Like, the reason why the live action remake of How to Train Your Dragon is happening is not because like people needed to see a live action How to Train Your Dragon, even though it'll make $1 bajillion. It's because Universal opened their Isle of Berk at their epic universe of adventure this week, and you'll notice that all the dragons look the same in the computer generated version and the live action version, so they only have one model for the theme park. It is like such a depressing illustration of the world that we live in and why these decisions are being made. Sorry.
You even get that with one of the big addition to the Nintendo theme parks was a big Donkey Kong Island, and then the Donkey Kong's the big game launching with Switch 2 this summer. So
yeah,
or I guess coming out a month later.
Synergy, baby, synergy.
I love it. I hate it. Makes me want to die. Last couple super chats. True Mando, thank you so much for a $2 dono. Apologies, obligatory. The 250 shout out. The greatest podcast, some say, on the entire internet. People have said that. People come up to me on the streets with tears in their eyes and they say, "Sir,
big guys, strong guys.
Why is the 250 such a great podcast?" Some steps were made with Jack and I doing an episode. To which Darren threw a suggestion, and Jack's reply was, "Oh no," in what sounded like a worried voice.
It's the thing is, this is why we'll need to talk about it in 2 weeks when Jack's back, baby. Because I feel like I need to hear the way that he says,
what kind of an "oh no" was it?
That's exactly. It's like, is it "oh no" as in get the hell out of here? I don't want to speak to you again. Darren, didn't you get the message from me not talking about Andor this week? Or is it a "oh no, this is such a genius idea and a perfect fit"? Because it came from a discussion that we had in, I think, the episode 2 weeks ago. It came from very specifically, we had a conversation and that got gears turning in my head. And I was like, actually, I would love to hear Jack and Marty unpack this thing. So yeah, I mean, we are talking about bringing you guys on for Schindler's List. I think that'll be a great Spoos and Goose episode.
I think who knows more about Holocaust films than Marty and Jack?
Yeah,
that's all.
I see you guys, and that's what I think. That's the first place my mind goes. But
honestly,
no,
the director of Andor's got a good horse in that race.
They called up Tony Gilroy. He said, "We're not available," and they're like, "Oh, we'll get Jack and Marty. That's fine."
It
was not Schindler's List. Just to be clear,
no.
It was not Schindler's List.
That was a joke. That was
a very bad movie. But Jack has no. Jack's life is built on bad movies, right? Rebellions are built on hope, and Jack is built on bad movies.
But no, Jack did say he didn't want to talk about like a bad movie, and I think like the reason why I chose that movie. Sorry, it feels like listeners are probably going to guess which movie it is from this description, but it is, in my opinion, a movie that was at the time accepted as being horrendously bad, hence being on the bottom 100, but which has since undergone. A reappraisal is perhaps a strong word, but I have heard people earnestly and sincerely make an argument that it is a good movie. That it is a good example of its genre. It is a good example of its star vehicle kind of power. And that is the kind of way in which I pitched it. It wasn't like, let's talk about how bad. I was actually, is there a discussion to be had about whether or not this is secretly a good movie?
It's Treasure Planet, right?
It obviously is. Sorry, Treasure Planet. Yeah.
Shout out to Treasure Planet. We don't need no badges with a $5 dono. Thank you so much. We don't need no badges. Andor is great, but in my opinion, The Rehearsal is the most amazing TV of recent memory. Please tell me at least one of y'all are as fielder pilled as me. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. Yes, I have watched the show. I watched the finale last night. I believe Darren and I were talking about before we went live, and I described it as possibly the most incredibly reckless television I've ever seen. of like, I know the entire show is blurring the line between fiction and reality, and that is what it's supposed to do. But by the end of the series, you're like, was this incredibly dangerous what you did just for a punchline goof that might be hinting at your own neuroses? And if so, I think it's great. Transgressive art, baby.
I mean,
Need to watch
the rehearsal is like, I have watched like the first season of it. It is a masterpiece, to be clear. I think it is incredibly well made. It is very thoughtful. I love the curse. I'm very fond of Fielder in general. The problem with the rehearsal is that it wanders into that like reality TV exploitation question, which is inherent in all reality television, but is obscured by like the editing of these, where you're watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians and the show wants you to forget about how horrible it is that you're watching this. Or the Baldwin show, which is like half his wife trying to kill him and half him grappling with the fact that he was involved in the death of another human being, in one of the most bizarre tonal mismatches in like the history of TV, forgetting about reality TV. But you're like, is this exploitative? Is this predatory? Are we taking advantage of people? And what does it mean that I am drawn to this? And that is woven into the fabric of all reality television, at least for me. And I don't mean to shame anybody who enjoys it. This is just me talking about my relationship to the genre. And I think what is fascinating about the rehearsal is the rehearsal brings all of those ideas to the fore, in that it is not the subtext of the rehearsal, but the text of the show itself. And I do, like, it is genius, and it is clever, and it's brilliant. And I find myself sitting there going, like, it's very smart that you're bringing it to the fore, but it doesn't make me any more comfortable with the fact that you're doing it. And I know that my discomfort is the point, and I get it, and it's very smart, it's very well done, but it's also like, I don't need to watch this to feel bad about this. I can just feel bad about this on my own.
It's I will say its final episode is incredibly transgressive to, I think, the first 5 episodes, I would say, of the second season. There's only 6 episodes. One of the many questions it asks is kind of, are we okay? Like, are we as a people okay? And this final episode is, again, how much of it is real? How much of it is the performance? Is Nathan Fielder asking, am I okay? And the way it ends is the most beautiful, like, am I okay kind of thing, which I think is just like a genuinely beautiful ending to a season of TV. Yeah.
I mean, again, I haven't seen the second season, and I guess like the first season's been that long enough that I can talk about it broadly without worrying that I'm spoiling the experience for somebody. But like, there is the difference between like the rehearsal and actual reality television is that Fielder is playing a character in there, and Fielder is very consciously making you aware of his involvement and in framing of what you are seeing in the context of reality television. It makes the editor visible. And what is so fascinating and uncomfortable about that first season is that ostensibly the show is about Fielder using a rehearsal to help people prepare for an event in their life that they are traumatized for, that they are like worried will go horribly wrong. So he presents them with a series of rehearsals for that will help them adapt to various situations and scenarios that may or may not arise. So the first one is somebody on a quiz team telling their friends that they, don't have a degree that they said they had a couple of years ago, and trying to process how that night could go. And the second one is like a woman who wants a child. And Fielder makes it very clear over the course of the season that it is less about these people than it is about himself. Where like from the outset, he's like, I rehearsed my meeting with this guy several times. This is my process as well. And over the course of like with the woman and the baby, she's trying to find a partner to help her raise the baby. And Fielder comes up with the idea of like, why couldn't I do that? Why couldn't it be my rehearsal as well? And it becomes kind of a therapy session for Fielder where, and he's talked about this, and he's, again, how much of this is fictional, how much of it is real is deliberately ambiguous, where like he is divorced and he had a breakup with his wife and he's processing that. And it's been suggested that maybe having kids was one of the tensions between them, whether or not they wanted kids, whether or not they were ready for kids. So the show becomes him rehearsing and recreating the circumstance of his own divorce using the people that he is ostensibly recruiting to help them work through their own stuff in a way that is like aware of all this. Oh, like this is not subtext. It's not like I'm criticizing the show. The show is criticizing itself, but it is so heady for me to sit with. I honestly do have difficulty like trying to, and that's the point. That's what makes it great. But it's also like I don't know if I have the headspace to pull these threads apart.
I just got recommendation whiplash. Like, I was like, damn, this sounds really great and interesting and introspective. And then it's like, oh, that introspective?
This sounds miserable.
Like it went through the grade. It's like, here's where you want to be. And it's just like,
and it
kept going. I'm like, do you know what? I'll go watch Rogue One again.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Sasi Guru with a €5 dono. Thank you so much, Darren. What is your opinion on the film The Old Guard? Speaking of Netflix movies, that was a Charlize Theron action movie from a few years ago.
Yeah, the vampire one. Yeah.
No, the Immortals one. No, it's Immortals though. So it's kind of in the same area. Okay. It's the ones where they can live forever and they're kind of bounty hunters. They're not bounty hunters, but they're mercenaries.
Oh.
I liked it, wished I loved it is kind of the space where I kind of landed with that, where it's the same director as The Woman King with Viola Davis a year later, which I think I enjoyed much more. Like, I like Charlize Theron, I like the cast, I like the premise. It's adapting a comic book that was written by Greg Rucka, who's a guy that I like. You can actually see over this shoulder here, there's a copy of the Daredevil run that he did with Ed Brubaker, if you want to zoom in there. I don't know if the camera's good enough, but like, I like all of the ingredients of this, but they don't really cohere into anything more than it's fine. And it's not bad. Like, it's not like I'm coming out going, well, that was disappointing, but it was fine. I love Eric's trying to zoom in there. I don't think the resolution's good enough. Enhance.
Zoom closer in on those 2 pixels.
Yeah,
they'll become clearer.
Wait, there. Hold on, I need to get the... Nope, there. Wait, there. Oh, now I'm... There we go. That's the one right there. Got it. This is so worth it. This is so worth it. But it's after the alias and before the... Anyway, but yes.
Engage hyperdrive.
Yeah. But I like it. I wish I love it is basically where I land with the Woman King. Sorry, not the Woman King, the Old Guard. Yeah.
Nice. Beastmarch with a $2 dono. Thank you so much, Beastmarch. I just joined the stream and now I'm depressed. Yeah. I don't know at what point, but
that was the live action discussion.
Oh, okay.
I'm on the stream and now I'm depressed.
Sorry. So look at that. And then Fungus Finder with a $2 dono. Who actually enjoys looking at real people? I keep saying that. I don't know.
Facts.
But like, so much of what makes those movies great is the fact that they're animated, and even in like Lilo and Stitch, where you could argue conceptually, like that is a movie about like an alien surrounded by human beings. Those human beings are illustrated in the style of Chris Sanders. The guy who was the head of like Disney Studios, Tom Schumacher, was like, the reason you should make this is to make it in your own distinct style, and Sanders does, and it is so surreal that you just strip all of that out, and you're like, and like even if you just look at the shots side by side, like they're so desaturated, they're so gray, they're so washed out, they're so unimaginative. That's just it is depressed. Sorry, I made myself depressed again.
Yeah.
I'm so against it. It actually
happens to the best of us.
Oh my god!
You're buzzing. You're practically buzzing.
Hell, Buzz Lightyear.
Hell,
you've absolutely Buzz Lightyeared. Before you float out into space, as we wrap up, Jay, what do you have going on? What should folks check out now that you're back on the planet?
The Buzz Lightyear version of me disappeared, and now I've got a plug. Yeah, on Friday we should have a new episode of Dev Heads where me, Mikey, and Tina are going to sit down and play some Elden Ring Night Rain. That's what it's called, right? It's not called like
that is what
live
it's called.
action Elden Ring Light Rain.
Live action Elden Ring Light Rain.
Yeah, so we're playing that, which is going to be cool, given our dev perspective. And then the following Monday, I will have a new episode of Design Delve for all you wonderful people. That is, I think, about it on my end. I'm sure I'm on a bunch of streams this week, but we shall see.
Hell yeah. Yeah, and the rest of the stream front, Nick and Jen will be back in about 30 minutes playing Tape to Tape. Tomorrow, normal Yahtzee Tries and Metroid. And then Thursday, Jack and Jess aren't going to be streaming, but Darren and I are going to be taking that spot, the same 12 p.m. Central, so the same time as Rewind is, but on Thursday. And I'll be playing through some of the first half of The Last of Us Part 2, Darren and I will be talking about The Last of Us season 2 TV show. We didn't talk about any of it here.
Hell yeah.
That'll be fair game. We'll be doing also a big old spoiler discussion of our thoughts on season 2 of the series. And listen, I hope everything works out for Joel in the end.
Sure, it'd be great. It's everything seems to go fine. Yeah, last I watched, he was like fixing electricity again. Seemed like he was in therapy. He's doing pretty good for himself. Seems like it can only go up. So I'm really looking forward to the next 6 episodes of the show.
He's creating Pearl Jam songs that were written several years after the zombie apocalypse. So good for him.
Mm-hmm.
It's really incredible.
It can't be any worse than Pascal fatigue that he has in real life, right? So
he's sick of himself as well.
Yeah.
Again, he is television's bad dad, and it's so interesting that the line they seem to be going with Fantastic Four is, "Look, it's your favorite dad, Pedro Pascal."
It's strange. That's going to be an interesting movie to talk about later on this summer. But aside from that, Darren, what else do you have? Next week is a backdrop week, correct?
It is indeed. That we'll be covering because Killer of Killers is releasing next Friday. We'll be talking about the Predator franchise, in particular the way that it's been overseen by Dan Trachtenberg. Really looking forward to doing that. I've got no idea what I'm going to be writing about in the columns this weekend, which will make it exciting for everybody, myself included. But I'm going to see the new Karate Kid tomorrow, which they're screening on the day of release, which is always an indicator that the movie is good, right?
It's things.
Yeah. That'll probably be it. I'll see if that'll be the next on the chopping block, as it were.
Wagga wagga.
And I guess shout out the 250 because somebody very kindly gave a donation to do that. But yes, the 250 is at the weekends. You can check that out on your streaming service of choice. Very proud of it. We're talking about Snow White this week, actually, ironically enough.
Live action?
To tie in, it made the bottom 100. To tie into the tie into the release of Lilo last week and Dragon next week. Very cynically, we're like, gotta get some of those live action streamings because that the people who go to those movies are like, I need to listen to a podcast about them right away.
I need someone to tell me why this movie was fucking terrible. Beautiful. That'll. Oh no, sorry. Sticking the gun with a €2 dono. Sorry, I missed it. Darren, reconfirm how great Kung Fu Hustle is.
Love Kung Fu Hustle so much. I mean, it's just a delight. Is it Stephen Chow or Stephen Cho? How do you pronounce that?
I think Chow. I say Chow.
Chow. Yeah, just incredible.
I think I know why this comment's coming up because in our Patreon movie nights for our top tier patrons, hey, come support us on Patreon. If you're a top tier patron, you can come watch movies with us and the gang. It's kind of a mystery who gets picked to pick a movie, and it was Ludo's pick, and she picked Kung Fu Hustle, and we had a whale of a time. It's such a great movie.
Ludo's got
great
taste.
Cinema.
Ludo's got great taste.
It actually is.
Like I said, I don't know anyone who doesn't like Kung Fu Hustle. Someone in the chat said, I think it might have been Mando or someone said they actually don't like it. In which case, I'll just ban them as soon as they announce themselves. So,
no thanks.
Yeah. It'll be easy. But yeah, thank you so much, Snake, for that one. And thank you so much, everyone who tuned in, watch live on YouTube, listen on your podcast service of choice, and of course, supports us over on Patreon. We appreciate each and every single one of you. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll be back in about half an hour. Nick and Jenna will be streaming tape to tape. But otherwise, this was Jay, Darren, Eric, and Marty for the Rewind episode number 22. Thank you all so much. And we'll see you all back here in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
I love that Jay gave the Wakanda for everything, and I gave the Queen wave.
That was Ruth Conda forever that he gave.
They're the two extremes.
Yeah.
inside us, two goodbye gestures wrestle.
Great.